Conspiracy. Noun. A secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. The action of plotting or conspiring. Coincidence. Noun. A remarkable occurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection. Correspondence in nature or in time of occurrence. Cover-up. Verb. Put something on top of or in front of something in order to protect or conceal it. Try to hide the fact of illegal or illicit activity. The truth is hidden behind the veil. Stay awake. Stay aware. Nothing is ever what it seems.
Indeed, nothing is ever as it seems. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on which of the 24/25 time zones you are listening to this show from. We will enter the matrix of the mind tonight here on WCAK 1124 AM as we head into the dark zone, where we tune into the unknown, the unexplained, and the utterly unnerving. Tonight marks the third episode of Conspiracy, Coincidence, or Cover-Up. We'll dissect phenomena that blur the lines between reality and nightmare, leaving you to decide what's lurking beneath the surface. On tonight's deep dive, we will look into Bigfoot. Tonight, we're not chasing a campfire story. We're not selling you a monster. We're doing something far more uncomfortable. We're pulling apart a question that refuses to stay buried. Bigfoot. Not as a joke, not as a brand, not as a tourist attraction or a punchline, but as a pattern. Because for over a century, something has been seen again and again in places where maps thin out and explanations fall short. And when you line up those encounters, three possibilities emerge, maybe even more. In segment 1, the conspiracy angle, we step into the claims that never make it into polite conversation. That Bigfoot is known, not suspected. That hunters, loggers, military personnel, and researchers have crossed paths with something that doesn't behave like an animal. The credible witnesses, people with nothing to gain, nothing to hide, have described coordinated movements, intelligence, and intent. We examine stories like the infamous shooter known as Bugs, who has been interviewed on Art Bell many times. The work of respected researchers like Robert W. Morgan and first-hand accounts that suggest Bigfoot may not be accidental, isolated, or even primitive. If the conspiracy angle is right, then Bigfoot isn't hiding, it's being allowed. In segment 2, the coincidence angle, we slow everything down. In segment 2, we strip away belief and ask the harder question. What if there is no creature? What if Bigfoot is a collision of psychologically environment, fear, and expectation? We explore how isolation, darkness, infrasound, misidentified wildlife, stress, and cultural storytelling can shape perception, especially in wilderness settings where the human mind is already under pressure. Here, we examine whether thousands of sightings could emerge without a single hidden species at all. If coincidence is the answer, then Bigfoot is a mirror. And what people are really seeing is themselves pushed to the edge. In segment 3, the cover-up angle, we stop asking what Bigfoot is and start asking why the question never gets answered. Why evidence disappears? Why reports get buried? Why national parks, federal lands, and remote preserves seem immune to scrutiny? We look at jurisdictional silence, missing persons in wilderness areas, the FBI's quiet interest, and the economic, legal, and environmental chaos that would follow the discovery of a non-humanoid. If there's a cover-up, it's not about hiding a monster. It's about protecting systems that would collapse under the truth. And in segment 4, the paranormal angle. We step where explanations fail. In our fourth segment, we enter the territory no one controls. You'll hear a chilling call from two campers who experienced a two-night encounter in the Pacific Northwest. An encounter defined not by violence, but by pressure, boundaries, and rules they didn't understand. From there, we explore the possibilities that Bigfoot isn't a creature at all, but a manifestation, a mask, a marker, a shadow cast by something that doesn't fully belong in our world. Time slips, liminal terrain, silence before sightings, the sense that some places are not empty, but occupied. If the paranormal angle is right, then Bigfoot isn't something to be proven. It's something you survive encountering. So tonight, we're not asking you to believe, we're asking you to listen. Because whether Bigfoot is conspiracy, coincidence, cover-up, or something far stranger, one thing is certain. The woods are not as empty as we pretend, and some questions don't want answers. They want witnesses. So buckle up and hold tight as we dig into Bigfoot. The conspiracy angle starts right after this short message.
Deep in the wilderness, trackers talk about footprints that don't make sense. Too long, too wide, too human to ignore. For decades, Bigfoot sightings all shared one detail. Whatever was running through those woods never slowed down. Coincidence? Or was somebody already designing for feet that big? Introducing Oasis running shoes. Lightweight, shock-absorbing, built for distance, speed, and terrain most people never see. Some say Oasis tested their tread patterns in areas where footprints disappear overnight. Others whisper a cover-up, that the largest sizes weren't made for athletes, but for something else. Because Oasis doesn't stop at size 12 or even 14. They go all the way up to size 19. For runners with big feet or bigger legends. Lace them up, hit the trail, and if something keeps pace beside you, don't look back. Oasis running shoes, made for those who leave tracks no one can explain. And remember to make Oasis your basis for life.
Welcome back to the Dark Zone, WCAK 1124 AM. I am your host, Sal Rock. Let's jump right in to the conspiracy angle of Bigfoot. Listen carefully tonight, because Bigfoot is not folklore, not campfire nonsense, not a joke mascot stamped on cheap souvenirs. Bigfoot is a problem, a biological, political, and territorial problem that the United States government has never solved, only managed. And that distinction matters, because governments don't suppress what doesn't exist. They don't monitor what isn't real. They don't intimidate witnesses over fairy tales. Yet with Bigfoot, they do all three. Here's the rule nobody likes to say out loud. If Bigfoot is real, then someone in authority has known for a very long time. And if they've known, then every denial since has been a lie. Bigfoot sightings are not limited to hunters, hikers, or drunks in the woods. They include people like active duty soldiers, National Guard units, Forestry Service patrols, border surveillance teams. These are not people prone to fantasy. There are reports, quietly circulated, never officially acknowledged, of training exercises interrupted by massive bipedal figures moving through restricted land. Figures that do not respond to warning shouts, do not appear on thermal-like known animals, do not behave like bears, do not flee like prey. Instead, they observe, and then they vanish. Military after-action reports often list these encounters as equipment malfunctions or visual interference. That's not dismissal, that's classification. Here's something you should sit with. Most Bigfoot sightings occur on federal land, national parks, protected forests, areas closed or restricted to the public. These lands are not just wilderness, they are jurisdictional black holes. Federal land means federal authority, federal silence, federal discretion. If a body is found, human or otherwise, the federal government takes over. No local press, no county sheriff press conference, no autopsy photos, just silence. Now ask yourself, why are entire sections of forest closed temporarily? For decades? For danger? Environmental recovery? Or something that doesn't fit into a museum display case? I have listened to many Art Bell shows when he was still alive, and still listen to him today. Art Bell didn't entertain nonsense callers all the time. He did many serious interviews trying to get to the truth. And when a man calling himself Bugs came on the air, claiming that he shot 2 Bigfoot, Art Bell didn't laugh at him. He didn't laugh him off. He listened. Bugs described something chilling. 2 creatures taller than any man, covered in dark hair, with human-like genitals, glowing eyes, moving deliberately, not animalistically. He fired because he felt threatened, not curious. And after the shot, the creatures did not behave like an animal. It did not thrash. It did not scream like prey. It retreated intelligently. And then things got worse. Bugs claimed government officials contacted him. He was warned not to speak. Evidence disappeared, like the map. He was treated not as a hunter, but as a liability. Well, Art Bell pressed him hard. And what came through the radio wasn't bravado. It was fear. Fear that doesn't fade. Fear that comes from knowing you crossed a line and you weren't supposed to see something. He claimed he was scared of possible prosecution if they were considered humanoid. Or did he have a deeper fear that was put on him privately by authorities? Authorities that show up at your front door late at night with no insignias on their clothes, possibly wearing all black. Now, Robert W. Morgan was with him on one of those interviews. And Robert W. Morgan didn't chase monsters. He chased patterns. As a seasoned investigator and broadcaster, Morgan approached Bigfoot the way intelligence agencies approach threats. Mapping clusters, tracking migration routes, comparing witness behavior, studying silence. Morgan noted something unsettling. Bigfoot sightings often aligned with underground cave systems, fresh water access, remote supply corridors, areas of mineral and strategic interest. That's not random. That's a territorial overlap. Bigfoot doesn't roam aimlessly. It stays where humans don't want to look closely. The missing bodies problem, let's talk about that just briefly. There's no bodies. That's the favorite argument of skeptics. But conspiracies don't ask why no bodies exist. They ask what happens if one is found. A Bigfoot body would collapse evolutionary timelines, force reclassification of human ancestry, create legal rights issues, trigger environmental protections, raise ethical questions no government wants to answer. If Bigfoot is a non-human hominid, then killing one isn't hunting. It would be homicide. Was that what Bugs was threatened with? Well, I'll let you ponder that one. So what happens instead? Bodies are removed. Incidents are sealed. Witnesses are discredited. Evidence is quietly confiscated. There's no museums, no press releases, no. Just another bear sighting. You know, this is why silence is the loudest evidence. If Bigfoot were fake, The government could prove it publicly, easily, definitively. Instead, they don't. They deflect. They minimize. They ridicule. Ridicule is a weapon. It keeps serious people quiet. It keeps witnesses isolated. It keeps the truth buried under laughter. Bigfoot is not hidden because it's rare. It's hidden because it doesn't fit. Not into science, not into law, not into history, and not into the comfortable lie that humans are alone at the top. This is only the beginning, because next we go deeper into why witnesses are threatened, why hunters disappear, why Bigfoot encounters sometimes come with UFOs, missing time, and dead silence, and why this creature may be protected, not hunted. Now let's talk about ownership, because that's where the rules change. Not folklore, not belief, but jurisdiction. Because Bigfoot doesn't live just anywhere. It lives where authority does. There are over 640 million acres of land in the United States that are federally controlled. Let that sink in for a minute. Over 640 million acres of land federally controlled. That include national parks, national forests, Bureau of Land Management territory, military training zones, protected wilderness. These places share one thing in common. When something happens there, local law enforcement steps aside. Federal agencies take over. No transparency requirements, no public accountability, no obligation to explain anomalies. If Bigfoot exists, even sporadically, this is exactly where it would be contained, monitored, and quietly removed from public knowledge. Do you ever wonder why park rangers don't talk? Well, park rangers sign non-disclosure agreements. That's not speculation, that's fact. They are trained to de-escalate encounters, redirect hikers, close areas without explanation, file reports that never become public. Former rangers have hinted at biological hazards, not listed on maps, night patrols avoided for reason never explained, problem animals that don't match known species, and when pressed, they stop talking. Not because they don't know, but because they know better. And what about the military angle that nobody wants to touch? There are Bigfoot encounters tied directly to military exercises. Men trained to identify threats, men trained to control fear, men trained to report accurately. And they describe massive upright figures pacing troop movements, objects thrown with calculated force, coordinated movement, not animal panic, eyes shine too high off the ground to be any known wildlife. These reports don't circulate publicly. They go into restricted channels. And once there, they vanish. The military doesn't classify bears. They classify unknowns. Hunters have reported something chilling. After reporting unusual tracks, vocalizations like the ones Art Bell shared on his show, vocalizations like this, well, I don't know about you, but that always gave me chills up and down my spine. But if they also had sightings, they were told to leave the area, warned not to return, informed the land was under review, met by federal vehicles they didn't call. No citations, no explanations, just pressure. That's not wildlife management, that's containment. And if you ever wonder why Bigfoot isn't eliminated, here's the question skeptics never answer. If Bigfoot is real, why hasn't the government killed one and ended the debate? because elimination creates evidence. Evidence creates responsibility. Responsibility creates consequences. If Bigfoot is intelligent, self-aware, social, closely related to humans, then killing one is not pest control. It's execution. And suddenly the government is standing in front of the world explaining why it destroyed a sentient species it hid for decades. That is not a press conference anyone wants. So instead of eradication, you manage. You monitor populations. You restrict access. You suppress encounters. You ridicule the witnesses, and you let the legend absorb the truth. Silence is not absence. Silence is pressure. It's the sound of something being held down. And Bigfoot is held down not by disbelief, but by policy. Because once you admit Bigfoot exists, you admit something far worse. That humanity has never been alone in its own territory. That we share this land with something older, something stronger, something we cannot control. And that brings us to the next layer of conspiracy. Because Bigfoot isn't just a biological problem. It's a psychological one. People don't just see Bigfoot. They experience missing time, dead silence, electronic failure, and sometimes something watching them think. At some point, every serious Bigfoot investigator reaches a wall. A moment where the evidence stops behaving biologically and starts behaving intelligently. Not animal intelligence, something colder, more strategic, almost aware of observation itself. This is where the conspiracy turns dark, because Bigfoot encounters do not always come alone. Sometimes they come with strangeness. Witnesses describe it the same way, across decades and across states. The forest goes quiet, not calm, not peaceful, just wrong. No birds, no insects, no wind, no ambient noise, just pressure. As if the land itself is holding its breath. Predators can cause silence, briefly, but this kind of silence spreads. It rolls outward like a wave. Hunters say they feel watched before they see anything, as if something knows where their eyes are. Well, that's not animal behavior. That's predator intelligence operating on another level. Some Bigfoot encounters don't end when creatures leave. They end when the clock stops making sense. People report hours missing, sun position changing impossibly, returning to camp long after they should have, equipment powered off or drained. No alcohol, no drugs, no hand injury, just gaps, time slips. And time slips are not associated with bears. They are associated with UFO encounters, abduction cases, high electromagnetic anomalies, and yes, Bigfoot sightings. There is an uncomfortable pattern investigators avoid publicly. Bigfoot sightings cluster near UFO hotspots, military testing corridors, remote mountain ranges, known magnetic anomalies. Witnesses have reported orbs above tree lines, silent lights maneuvering intelligently, Bigfoot appearing after UFO sightings, Bigfoot vanishing immediately before aerial anomalies. This is not fringe. This is pattern recognition, and patterns suggest coordination or shared origin. Some researchers propose something radical. Bigfoot is not always here. It moves between layers, not from another planet, but from another frequency, another bandwidth of reality. This explains why tracks begin and then end abruptly, why bodies are never found, why Bigfoot can vanish in open terrain, and why electronics malfunction. You're not chasing an animal, you're witnessing intersection. a place where worlds brush together briefly and something steps through. Bigfoot does not act like prey. It doesn't bolt blindly. It doesn't panic. It doesn't charge recklessly. It tests boundaries, throws objects to gauge reaction, circles camps, uses terrain intelligently, avoids direct confrontation unless necessary. This is a strategic behavior. It knows what humans are. It knows what guns are. It knows what lights are. And it still approaches. That should terrify you. If Bigfoot were an animal, it could be managed. But if Bigfoot represents a parallel intelligence, an interdimensional presence, a species not bound by our rules of space and time, then disclosure becomes impossible. Because the public can handle predators. It cannot handle neighbors, especially neighbors who walk unseen, move between worlds, and observe us as closely as we observe them. This isn't about monsters. It's about coexisting with consent. Something lives in the deep woods that is aware of us, avoids us, monitors us, and sometimes intervenes. And the conspiracy exists not to hide Bigfoot, but to hide what Bigfoot implies. And now we arrive at the most dangerous part of the theory, because some encounters don't end with fear. They end with violence, and in rare cases, with someone pulling the trigger. This is where conspiracy stops being abstract. This is where stories stop sounding like folklore and start sounding like crime scenes, because people have shot at Bigfoot, and what happens next is never what you'd expect. Hunters describe it the same way. The shot was clean, the distance was right, the rifle was reliable, and the target did not fall. Instead, witnesses report the creature flinched, not panicked, turns its head towards the shooter, makes eye contact, then moved with controlled speed into cover, not running, but relocating. Some say it vocalized, not a scream, but a low, resonant sound, kind of felt more than heard. And then, silence. No blood trail, no body, no sign of collapse. That alone should end the debate. Several hunters have claimed to recover hair samples, blood-stained vegetation, tissue fragments, and every time the story ends the same way. Samples are confiscated. Results are inconclusive. Labs refuse to comment. Communication stops. In some cases, the witnesses themselves become the story. Their credibility attacked. Their sanity questioned. Their past examined for weakness. Discredit the witness. The evidence dies with them. In the case of Bugs, he claimed to give Art Bell the map to the location of the buried Bigfoot bodies. Would that have provided proof? Existence? Size? DNA? Location? Well, if it would have, the map, if there ever was one, is certainly gone now. Perhaps sitting on a shelf next to the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, Art's parts, the Roswell UFO files. Let's be direct. A Bigfoot corpse would cause immediate international attention, legal battles over species classification, ethical debates about intelligence and rights, questions about how long the government knew, demands for protective status, and worst of all, proof that humans have been killing something they never tried to understand. That is not survivable politically. So the priority is simple. Never let a body surface. If one does, it doesn't stay in civilian hands. There are persistent rumors among loggers and hunters of rapid response teams, helicopters at odd hours, roads closed overnight, evidence removed before sunrise. Not officially acknowledged, never documented, but always whispered, always consistent. and always followed by silence. People who shoot at Bigfoot don't brag. They withdraw. They stop hunting. They sell their gear. They move. Some people develop anxiety. Some refuse to enter a forest again. Some won't even say the word Bigfoot out loud because whatever they saw that night saw them back and did not forget. That was one of Bug's biggest fears, that they knew him, that they would come back for revenge. He claims to have given up hunting and no longer owns a gun. That's what a Bigfoot encounter leaves you with. If Bigfoot were an animal, gunfire would end the story. But gunfire doesn't end Bigfoot encounters. It changes them. And whatever comes after the shot is not something witnesses want to relive. And now we approach the final layer of the conspiracy angle, because Bigfoot isn't just protected by silence. It may be protected by design, by purpose, by something far older than the federal land or government policy. Before there were governments, before there were maps, before there were boundaries drawn on ink and blood, there were warnings. Not myths, not metaphors, warnings. And they were not written in books, they were spoken. The indigenous tribes across North America described the same being using different names. Sasquatch, Skookum, Ganoskawa, Bogs, Stone Giants, Hairy Men, separated by thousands of miles, separated by language, separated by culture, yet describing the same traits. Upright, massive, intelligent, territorial, ancient, dangerous when disrespected. Coincidence does not explain convergent oral history, especially when these stories predate modern media by centuries. Here's what modern culture refuses to hear. Native traditions do not describe Bigfoot as an animal. They describe it as another people. Not human, but not animal. Something in between. Something that existed before human dominance. Something that pushed to the margins. Something that learned to survive by avoiding us, and sometimes by confronting us. The elders did not tell stories to scare children. They gave instructions, rules for entering the forest, rules for behavior, rules for survival. Do not whistle at night. Do not mock what you hear. Do not follow voices that know your name. Do not take more than you need. Do not wander alone. These are not superstition. These are field manuals passed down through generations. And modern man laughs them off. Some tribal stories are not vague. They are specific. Men who harassed the forest guardians were found broken. Hunters who took more than they needed were never found. Villages that disrespected boundaries were forced to move. Not attacked indiscriminately, but corrected. That's not animal behavior. That's enforcement. Look, here's the quiet truth. If indigenous oral history is validated, then Bigfoot isn't a discovery. It's an inheritance that we ignored. It means the land was never truly ours. It means the treaties didn't just fail humans, they failed something else that lived here first. Something without paperwork, without representation, without a voice in a court. And once you acknowledge that, you can't unring that bell. Robert W. Morgan noticed something most researchers avoid. Bigfoot sightings are lower near reservations. Not absent, lower, as if boundaries are understood, as if agreements exist. Not written agreements, older ones. That alone should terrify you, because it suggests intelligence, memory, and respect for rules we no longer remember. Bigfoot didn't disappear. It withdrew. As humans multiplied, as forests vanish, as gunfire replaced reverence, what remains is a remnant population. It's watchful, suspicious, adaptive, and still here. The conspiracy didn't begin with the FBI, or the Park Service, or the military. It began when modern society decided if something doesn't fit our worldview, we erase it. We cancel it. We turned ancient neighbors into campfire jokes. We dismissed warnings as superstition. We replaced listening with logging. And now we pretend silence means absence. Bigfoot is not hiding from us. It is waiting us out. Civilizations rise and civilizations fall. The forest remembers, and something in it has been watching humans long enough to know we never learn. We have laid the foundation. Government knowledge, federal silence, military encounters, the bugs shooting, high strangeness, ancient intelligence. Next comes segment 2, the coincidence angle, where we strip away belief and ask the hardest questions of all. What if Bigfoot isn't extraordinary at all, and we're the ones misreading the woods? I am Sal Roch, and you are sitting in the matrix of the mind here in the dark zone on WCAK 1124 AM. We will be right back after this message to start segment 2, the coincidence angle of Bigfoot.
When the sun goes down in the deep woods, the forest gets bigger, quieter, and whatever's out there starts moving closer. That's why serious campers trust Oasis camping tents. Heavy-duty fabric, reinforced seams, built to withstand wind, rain, and unanswered questions. For years, Bigfoot researchers noticed something strange. Tents ripped open, gear moved, but no tracks leading away. Coincidence? Or a cover-up no one wants to talk about? Some say Oasis tested their tents in places where trail cams stop working, where footsteps circle your campsite, but never cross the firelight. Others whisper the material wasn't designed just to keep weather out, but to keep something from getting in. Zip it shut. Listen to the breathing outside, and trust what's between you and the dark. Oasis. Camping tents. Because some nights, the forest is watching you. Remember to make Oasis your basis for life.
Conspiracy. Coincidence. Cover up. Nothing is ever what it seems. Nothing is ever what it seems.
Welcome back to the Matrix of the Mind here on WCAK 1124 AM. I am your host, Sal Roch. We are about to jump into segment 2 of Bigfoot, the coincidence angle. Now let's pull the emergency brake, because if Bigfoot is not a government secret, not an ancient intelligence, not interdimensional, then what's left? Well, what's left is human perception, operating at its weakest point, alone, in the dark, in unfamiliar terrain, under stress. Coincidence begins with the hard truth most people don't like to hear. The wilderness rewires the brain. To understand this, we need to dive into the science of how isolation in nature alters our senses and cognition. Deep forests, like those in the Pacific Northwest, where many Bigfoot sightings occur, are environments designed by evolution to challenge human perception. The dense canopy blocks light, creating perpetual twilight even during the day. Sounds echo unpredictably off trees and hills, and the uneven terrain forces constant vigilance. This isn't just poetic, it's biological. Studies in environmental psychology show that prolonged exposure to wilderness settings increase cortisol levels, the stress hormone, which in turn heightens sensory acuity but also amplifies errors in interpretation. It's no accident that regions like Washington's Cascade Mountains or Oregon's dense woodlands report clusters of sightings. These are areas where humans frequently enter but remain outsiders, vulnerable to the environment's tricks. Fear is a lens, not a flaw. When you step into the deep forest, your senses change priorities. Vision narrows. Peripheral sight diminishes as the brain focuses on potential threats ahead, a survival mechanism rooted in our hunter-gatherer past. Hearing exaggerates. Every rustle becomes amplified as the auditory cortex overcompensates for visual limitations. Shadows stretch. Low light conditions play with depth perception, making distant objects seem closer or larger. Movement feels intentional. The brain's amygdala, the fear center, assigns agencies to random motions like wind-swayed branches. Your brain stops asking, "What is this?" and starts asking, "What can hurt me?" This is survival biology, and survival biology does not care about accuracy. Consider the real-world implications. In a 2019 report from the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, a hiker in McDowell County, North Carolina, described seeing a large bipedal creature with long arms and reddish-brown hair, lurking near a trail. The witness was alone, after dark, in an area known for black bear activity. Fear didn't just color the experience, it reshaped it. Neuroscientists explain this through the concept of threat bias, where stressed individuals are more likely to interpret ambiguous stimuli as dangerous. In the wilderness, this bias turns natural events into ominous encounters. The upright bear problem. Let's deal with the most uncomfortable coincidence of all: bears. Black bears can stand upright, often reaching heights of 5 to 7 feet, but appearing taller in dim light or from a distance. They walk short distances bipedally. Documented behaviors include standing to reach for food or intimidate, mimicking a humanoid gait. They reach 7 to 9 feet when fully upright. Especially larger males, which can weigh up to 600 pounds and project a massive silhouette, appear broad-shouldered in low light. Their muscular build and fur create a humanoid shoulder line, have forward-facing eye shine. Reflective tapetum lucidum in their eyes glows under flashlights, often described as red eyes in sightings. A bear with mange? A bear wet from rain? A bear partially obscured by trees? Your brain fills in the rest. And once fear enters, the memory rewrites itself. Not lying, reconstructing. This isn't speculation. It's backed by data. A study published in the Journal of Zoology in January 2024 analyzed thousands of Bigfoot sightings and found a strong correlation with black bear populations. For every 5,000 black bears, there's an average of one reported Sasquatch sighting. In areas like Florida, where black bears are less common, Bigfoot reports drop dramatically. So unless you're in a bear-heavy zone like the Appalachians, well, Take the famous 1924 Ape Canyon incident in Washington state, where miners claimed attacks by ape-like creatures. Skeptics point out that grizzly bears, known to stand upright and charge, were abundant in the area at the time. A mangy bear, suffering from sarcoptic mange, loses fur and appears skinny and humanoid, with elongated limbs and a gaunt face? Perfect for misidentification and twilight. Real examples abound. In 2023, a viral video from Colorado showed what appeared to be a Sasquatch crossing a snowy field, but wildlife experts identified it as a black bear with unusual posture due to injury. Similarly, in Pennsylvania's dense forests, a 2022 sighting described a 7-foot hairy man that turned out to be a bear foraging on his hind legs, as confirmed by trail cam footage later. These aren't rare. The BFRO database lists over 75,000 reports, many clustering in bear habitats like the Rocky Mountains or Sierra Nevadas. Coincidence? Or the brain's desperate attempt to categorize the unfamiliar? Why witnesses are so convincing? People don't fake fear well, and Bigfoot witnesses often sound genuinely shaken. But coincidence explains this. Trauma doesn't require truth, it requires certainty. If your brain decides you encountered something impossible, your emotional response becomes locked in, and later information doesn't overwrite it, it reinforces it. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, as decades of psychological research show. In high adrenaline situations, like a solo hike gone eerie, the brain encodes emotions more vividly than details. A 2024 podcast episode of Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio features a witness from Ohio who described a Sasquatch peering into his tent, leaving him changed forever. He wasn't lying. His trauma was real, born from perceived threat. But as Elizabeth Loftus' work on false memories demonstrates, certainty grows with retelling, even if the event was a misfired shadow or animal. Pareidolia, faces in the forest. Humans evolved to see faces everywhere, in the clouds, in trees, shadows, because missing a face once could mean your death. The forest is a pareidolia factory. Tree knots that look like eyes. Twisted bark forms eerie stares, especially in old-growth forests. Branches look like arms. Wind-blown limbs mimic reaching figures. Moving foliage becomes movement with intent. Rustling leaves suggest lurking entities. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Pareidolia is a well-documented cognitive bias where the brain imposes familiar patterns on random stimuli. In Bigfoot contexts, it's rampant. A 2022 Reddit post analyzed a photo from the Sam Houston National Forest where a face in the trees was debated as Sasquatch or pareidolia. Similarly, in Florida's mid-Florida forest, hikers frequently report Bigfoot faces in wood grain, as shared on online groups. A 2024 Instagram reel captured eerie footage of a foggy road crossing, later attributed to pareidolia in branches. These aren't delusions. They're evolutionary shortcuts gone awry in the chaotic visual field of the woods. Why sightings cluster? Bigfoot sightings cluster geographically. Yes, they do. But coincidence asks a simpler question. Why do people cluster? Popular hiking routes. Trails like the Pacific Crest draw thousands annually. Hunting grounds. Remote areas overlap with game habitats. Logging roads. Accessible yet isolated spots. National parks. Places like Yosemite or the Hoosier National Forest. remote but accessible locations, near power lines or clearings. Well, that's where people go. And where people go, stories follow. One sighting primes the next. Not because Bigfoot moved in, because expectation did. Geospatial analysis confirms this. In 2021, ArcGIS studies mapped sightings, finding they align with human population density and accessible wilderness, not isolated voids. In Ohio, which ranks 4th in U.S. sightings with reports in all 88 counties, clusters occur near urban edges like the Hudson River Valley. A 2024 model showed 70 to 80% of encounters within 5 miles of power lines, where visibility and access increase. Bear populations overlap too. Sighting spikes in Cascadia and the Ohio River Valley, which are prime bear territories. The echo effect. Once an area gains a reputation, normal sounds are reinterpreted. Owl hoots become unknown vocalizations. Animal calls become unknown vocalizations like coyote howls twisted into Sasquatch screams. Footprints become evidence. Bear tracks overlaid or distorted by weather. Silence becomes presence, the something's watching us feeling. The forest hasn't changed. The story has. Coincidence doesn't say witnesses are stupid. It says the human mind is suggestible under isolation, and the woods isolate better than anywhere on Earth. In the Skookum Meadows expedition of 2000, bait lured what was claimed as a Sasquatch body print, but skeptics noted and it matched elk and bear impressions in the mud. Reputation's echoes. Once labeled a hotspot, more reports flood in. So the coincidence angle so far. Strip away conspiracy, strip away paranormal explanations, and Bigfoot becomes fear amplified by isolation, cortisol-driven hypervigilance, wildlife misidentification, bears, owls, and more, memory reconstruction, emotional encoding over fact, pattern-seeking behavior, pareidolia and threat bias, cultural expectation, primed by media and lore. It's not fraud, not delusion, just human cognition doing what it evolved to do. But coincidence has to answer harder questions next. Because bears don't throw rocks with precision. They don't circle camps. They don't seem to test boundaries. And they don't inspire the same story across decades, across cultures. So coincidence isn't finished yet. It still has some more explaining to do. Look, if Bigfoot were real, skeptics argue, someone would have proven it by now. So let's address the uncomfortable fuel that keeps the legend alive. Hoaxes. Because hoaxes don't disprove Bigfoot, they just complicate it. Hoaxes thrive in the ambiguity of the wilderness, where evidence is fleeting and verification difficult. Since the 1950s, when the term Bigfoot entered popular lexicon, fabricated evidence has muddied the waters, making genuine misidentifications harder to discern from deliberate deceptions. But understanding hoaxes requires examining their mechanisms, motivations, and ripple effect on public perception. The hoaxer's advantage? Here's a reality nobody likes to admit. It is incredibly easy to fake Bigfoot evidence. Large footprints? A wooden mold. Carved boards pressed into mud, as in the 1958 Bluff Creek tracks. Hair samples? Livestock, pets, custom fur, often submitted to labs only to match unknown animals. Audio recordings, modified animal calls, digitally altered howls or screams, blurry photos, intentional motion and distance, shaky cams hide details. The forest is the perfect crime scene. No witnesses, no baseline, no control conditions, a lie can live there for decades. The word Bigfoot itself stems from a hoax. In 1958, Ray Wallace, a California logger, created 16-inch footprints using carved wooden feet, sparking media frenzy and coining the term. His family revealed the prank after his death in 2002, but by then it had inspired countless copycats. In 2008, the Georgia Bigfoot hoax involved two men claiming a frozen Sasquatch corpse revealed a rubber gorilla suit stuffed with animal guts. A 2024 History Channel compilation exposed 4 more. Fake tracks in Minnesota, a staged video in Idaho, an altered photo from Texas. These aren't isolated. They exploit the forced isolation, where tracks fade and photos blur. The Patterson-Gimlin problem. Every Bigfoot discussion eventually hits the same wall. The Patterson-Gimlin film. Some call it proof. Others call it a man in a suit. Coincidence doesn't need to decide which, because either way, it worked. The film created a visual template. The swinging arms, the broad back, a shared expectation, influencing future descriptions, a cultural silhouette that's iconic in the media. After that moment, every sighting had a reference point. People didn't just see something tall and hairy, they saw that shape. Memory doesn't record raw footage, it records interpretation. Filmed in 1967 near Bluff Creek, California, the 59-second clip showed a hairy figure striding across a riverbed. Skeptics argue it's a costume. Costume designer Bill Mumm's 2023 analysis noted inconsistencies in limb proportions and fur movement, suggesting a suit. Bob Hermanis claimed in 2004 to be the man inside, describing a horsehide suit made by Philip Morris. In a 2023 graphic compiled argument, proponents cite muscle ripple. Skeptics point to a zipper line and stabilized footage. Regardless, it set a template. Post-1967 sightings often matched the film's gait and build, suggesting cultural contamination. Copycat sightings. Once a legend takes hold, it reproduces itself. Not maliciously, naturally. One person reports a sighting, another hears about it. Another goes into the woods already primed, and suddenly, normal sounds feel purposeful. Twigs snapping his footsteps. Normal movements feels watched. Wind as breathing. Normal animals feel wrong. Bear as bipeds. Coincidence says Bigfoot sightings spread the way most ghost sightings do, through expectation contamination. And media plays a key role. Shows like Finding Bigfoot and Mountain Monsters have amplified reports, with sightings surging after episodes air in specific regions. In 2024, a YouTube compilation of 13 sightings showed patterns. Many post-Patterson descriptions echo the film. A Pennsylvania fishing incident in 2023 described a bizarre Bigfoot with details mirroring viral videos. Copycats aren't always hoaxes. They're primed perceptions. And why hoaxes persist? Some hoaxers want money. Some want attention. Some just want to mess with people. But most, they want to belong. Bigfoot gives people a role in a story bigger than themselves. They become the witness, sharing on forums, the discoverer, submitting evidence, the keeper of forbidden knowledge, joining communities. And once they're in that role, backing out feels like erasing themselves. A 2023 Sapiens article on a 1960s hoax noted it eroded public trust in science as hoaxers sought community and fringe groups. Financial incentives linger. Books, tours, and merchandise fuel persistence. Media amplification, Radio shows, documentaries, podcasts, internet forums, each retelling smooths the edges. Each repetition adds confidence. Details grow sharper over time, which is the opposite of how memory actually works. Coincidence says, if Bigfoot were a mistake repeated often enough, it would start to feel real. From the 1924 Ape Canyon to modern YouTube, media retells stories, sharpening details. A 2025 Mystery Files episode questioned if amplification creates belief. Why debunking never ends? Debunking fails because it misunderstands the problem. Bigfoot is not a claim. It is an experience, and experiences are immune to correction. You can disprove the evidence. You cannot disprove the fear someone felt alone in the woods at night. So the story survives. Even after Wallace's hoax reveal, sightings continued. Belief is emotional, not evidentiary. The coincidence angles hard truth. Bigfoot may not be a creature. It may be a container, a place where fear goes, unresolved wilderness anxiety, mystery goes, the unknown explained, isolation goes, human vulnerability symbolized, our needs for meaning goes, stories filling voids. The woods don't lie, but they don't tell the truth either. They let us tell it for them. And still, coincidence hasn't answered everything, because hoaxes don't explain rock throwing with intent, often misattributed animal behavior, repeated territorial behavior, bears marking the territory, the same warnings across cultures, the shared human fears, why people leave the woods changed, trauma from isolation. So coincidence has one more layer to peel back, and it's the most uncomfortable one of all. There's a final coincidence explanation that makes people angry, because it doesn't attack the woods, it attacks us. At its core, this part confronts the fragility of human memory and the power of trauma. Neuroscience reveals that brains are not impartial recorders, but active constructors, especially under duress. In the context of Bigfoot, this means many encounters may originate not from external creatures, but internal reconstructions. Memory is not a recording. Your brain does not store events like a camera. It stores fragments, snippets of sight, sound, smell, sensations like heart racing and skin prickling, emotional spikes, fear, awe, and confusion. Then it reassembles them later. Every time you remember something, you are not replaying it, you are rewriting it. And that's not theory, that's neuroscience. And it's devastating to eyewitness testimony. Elizabeth Loftus' seminal work since the 1970s shows how memories are malleable, influenced by suggestion and time. In Bigfoot cases, a fleeting glimpse becomes a detailed Sasquatch over retellings. A 2024 Quora discussion on eyewitness credibility noted that Bigfoot reports often evolve, gaining certainty years later. Fear rewrites the past. During high stress, time distorts. Seconds feel like minutes, right? Size exaggerates. Figures loom larger than they really are. Sound deepens. Growls, they seem guttural. Movement slows or accelerates, enhancing the menace. Your brain prioritizes survival, not accuracy. So when someone says, "I know what I saw," coincidence says, they know what they felt. And feeling is louder than fact. A 2024 study on petrotraumatic threat found that perceived danger amplifies intrusive memories, even if the threat was illusionary. In a 2023 Bigfoot eyewitness episode, a witness described a farm encounter with mind speak, but hypnosis revealed fragmented recalls shaped by fear. The something was wrong effect. Many Bigfoot encounters don't begin with a sighting. They begin with a sensation. Silence. Sudden quiet as presence, pressure, atmospheric dread, being watched, paranoia from isolation, dread without cause, autonomic response. This is not paranormal. It's ancient. Your nervous system is designed to detect threat before conscious thought. Sometimes it fires correctly. Sometimes it misfires. And once it fires, your brain looks for a reason. And if the story of Bigfoot exists in your mind, that's what it grabs. This warning signal hypothesis explains why intrusive memories feel threatening. In Ohio's 2024 report, witnesses described foggy breathing and heavy steps, attributing to Sasquatch, which could be anxiety-induced hallucinations. Why details get better over time? Ask witnesses right after an event, and you'll hear uncertainty. Ask them years later, and you'll hear clarity. And that should worry you, because memory does the opposite of what truth does. It solidifies, not fades. Each retelling removes doubt. Each retelling adds structure. Eventually, the memory becomes immune to challenge. Not because it's true, because it's complete. Research on false memories for trauma shows details sharpen with repetition, especially threat-related. A 2013 Cryptomundo post on hypnosis and Bigfoot recall noted how sessions enhance memories, often adding elements. Shared false memories? When witnesses talk to each other, something dangerous happens. Details sync, not intentionally, subconsciously. One person mentions broad shoulders, another remembers them too. Someone recalls red eyes, now everyone saw them. And this isn't lying, it's convergence, and it's how legends stabilize. Group discussions in BFRO expeditions often lead to synchronized reports. A 2024 study on collective memory showed trauma cues spread, heightening shared perceptions. Trauma without a monster? Now here's the hardest coincidence pill to swallow. You can be traumatized by something that didn't happen. Your body doesn't care. Your adrenaline doesn't care. Your fear response doesn't care. If your brain believes you were threatened, the trauma is real. And so is the conviction that follows. Consistent trauma exposure leads to overperception of threats. Bigfoot witnesses report PTSD-like symptoms from encounters, even if misfired. And why people leave the woods changed? Bigfoot witnesses often say, "I never went back." Coincidence says, that makes sense. The forest stripped away control, exposed vulnerability, reminded them how small they are. Bigfoot becomes the symbol, but the wound came from something deeper. In a 2025 unexplained episode, witnesses described life-altering fear from sightings. It's the wilderness's raw power, not a monster. The coincidence angle's final form. Reduce Bigfoot to coincidence, and you're left with a powerful environment, rewiring senses, a vulnerable human brain that's prone to errors, cultural expectation priming interpretations, memory reconstruction, building false certainties, fear seeking meaning, trauma from the perceived. No monsters required, no conspiracy needed, just a species that evolved stories to survive the dark. And yet, this explanation feels incomplete, unsatisfying, because coincidence explains how Bigfoot persists, but not why it refuses to die. And that brings us to segment 3, the one nobody wants to talk about. Because if coincidence is not enough, and conspiracy isn't the whole truth, then what remains is intent. You are listening to The Dark Zone, WCAK 1124 AM, here in the Matrix of the Mind. We will be right back for segment 3 of Bigfoot, right after this short break.
When you're deep in the woods, there comes a moment when silence isn't comforting anymore. It's watching, waiting. That's when you reach for oasis signal flares. Bright, reliable, visible for miles, designed for emergencies and situations no map prepares you for. Bigfoot researchers report something strange. When flares ignite, the footsteps stop. The tree knocks go quiet, and whatever was circling backs away into the dark. Coincidence? Or does Oasis use a compound that disrupts something older than trail markers and GPS? Some claim that flares burn at a frequency wildlife avoids. Others whisper a cover-up, that these weren't designed for hikers at all, but for encounters no one officially admits exist. Pull the cap, strike the flare, and let the forest know you're not alone anymore. Oasis signal flares when the dark gets closer than it should. And remember to make Oasis your basis or life.
Conspiracy, coincidence, cover up. Nothing is ever what it seems.
Nothing is ever what it seems. Nothing is ever what it seems.
Nothing is ever what it seems.
Conspiracy,
Coincidence,
cover up. Nothing is ever what it seems.
Welcome back to the Matrix of the Mind here on WCAK 1124 AM, where we have been discovering Bigfoot. We have looked at the conspiracy angle. We have looked at the coincidence angle. And now we are about to explore the cover-up angle. Silence is not natural. Let's stop pretending ignorance is accidental. Governments lose paperwork. Agencies misfile reports. Evidence degrades. Witnesses get discouraged. That happens. But patterns don't happen by mistake. And when you lay Bigfoot encounters out chronologically, geographically, bureaucratically, what you don't see is chaos. You see containment. To really grasp this, we need to dive deep into the history of how patterns emerge. Bigfoot sightings aren't random blips on a map. They're threaded through decades of documented encounters that, when pieced together, reveal a deliberate system of deflection and denial. Take, for instance, the early 20th century reports from Native American tribes in the Pacific Northwest, where Sasquatch legends weren't just folklore, but lived experiences, passed down orally. These stories often described massive, hairy beings that roamed the dense forest, avoiding human contact, but occasionally leaving footprints or vocalizations that echoed through the valleys. Fast forward to the 1950s and the 1960s, when modern sightings exploded in places like Bluff Creek, California, culminating in the famous Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. That footage, showing a large, bipedal creature striding across a creek bed, wasn't just a viral sensation. It triggered a wave of reports that agencies like the U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service had to address. or rather, redirect. Chronologically, the sightings build like a timeline of evasion. In the 1970s, reports surged in states like Washington and Oregon, with clusters around Mount St. Helens before its 1980 eruption. Geographically, these aren't urban myths. They're pinpointed to remote wilderness areas where jurisdiction blurs between federal, state, and tribal lands. Bureaucratically, every report seems to follow a scripted path. Initial logging by local rangers, escalation to higher authorities, and then a quiet fade into unsubstantiated status. This isn't mere oversight. It's a containment strategy honed over generations, ensuring that Bigfoot remains in the realm of legend rather than fact. Consider the sheer volume. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization has cataloged over 5,000 sightings across North America, with patterns showing spikes in activity during certain seasons or after natural disturbances like wildfires or volcanic events. Yet, official responses are uniformly dismissive, often citing misidentification of bears or hoaxes without thorough investigation. This pattern of containment is abstract. It's etched into real cases. For example, in 1958, construction workers in Humboldt County, California, found massive footprints around their equipment, leading to the coining of the term Bigfoot by journalist Andrew Gonzalez. The story made headlines, but federal agencies like the Bureau of Land Management quickly downplayed it, attributing the prints to pranks despite plaster castings showing dermal ridges, unique skin patterns not replicable by fakes at that time. As we map these out, the containment becomes clear. Reports are funneled upward, isolated from public scrutiny, and neutralized through bureaucratic inertia. It's not chaos, it's calculated silence. The first red flag? Where Bigfoot is allowed to exist. Bigfoot encounters don't happen just anywhere. They happen in jurisdictional dead zones, national parks, federal forests, wilderness preserves, logging land under federal lease, military adjacent wilderness, places where no single authority fully owns responsibility. If something happens there, reports don't stop, they bounce. County to state, state to federal, federal to under review, and then nothing. That's not incompetence. That's insulation. Expanding on this, these jurisdictional dead zones are the perfect breeding ground for ambiguity. National parks alone span over 85 million acres in the U.S., managed by the National Park Service, under the Department of the Interior. Federal forests, overseen by the U.S. Forest Service, USFS, and the Department of Agriculture. That adds another 193 million acres. Wilderness preserves, designated under the 1964 Wilderness Act, restrict human development, creating vast, unmonitored expanses. Logging lands under federal lease involve private companies, but fall under the USFS oversight, adding layers of contractual complexity. What about military adjacent wilderness, like areas bordering bases such as Fort Lewis in Washington or Camp Pendleton in California? Well, that introduces the Department of Defense involvement, where security classifications can override civilian inquiries. Real encounters highlight this insulation. In 1977, at Fort Lewis, now Joint Base Lewis-McChord, soldiers reported a nighttime encounter with a large bipedal creature during training exercises. The report bounced from military police to base command, then to USFS, since the area overlapped federal land, and ultimately vanished into classified files. Similarly, in Pennsylvania's Wilds region along the Clarion River in 2016, 6 independent sightings were reported, but they were dismissed as bear activity by state wildlife officials. despite witnesses describing upright postures and vocalizations unlike any known animal. In Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, Washington, a hotspot with over 100 BFRO reports, recent discoveries of human remains in 2024 near missing hiker sites raised questions, but investigations stalled at the federal level, citing ongoing reviews. These bounces aren't accidental. Jurisdictional overlap means no one entity is fully accountable. A county sheriff might log a report, but if it's on federal land, it's escalated to NPS or USFS, where it enters a maze of interagency protocols. From there, it could go to the Fish and Wildlife Service for species identification, or even the FBI if foul play is suspected. But in practice, these reports often end up in under review limbo, insulated from public access. This system protects not just the land, but the status quo, ensuring that anomalous evidence doesn't disrupt established narratives. National parks, the perfect blind spot. National parks are sold as protected land. They're also controlled environments, limited access points, seasonal staffing, controlled narratives, remote terrain. If something goes wrong, the response is simple. Close a trail, blame the weather, cite wildlife, label it a missing hiker. No press conference, no investigation anyone can watch, no follow-up, and if evidence is found, it doesn't stay local. It never does. Delving deeper, national parks like Yellowstone, established in 1872 as the first in the world, encompass over 2.2 million acres of rugged terrain with limited roads and seasonal ranger presence. Yosemite, Glacier, and Olympic national parks follow suit, each with vast backcountry areas where cell service is non-existent and oversight is minimal. These controlled environments allow for narrative management. Entrance gates monitor visitors. Interpretive centers shape public perception, and media releases are vetted through the NPS headquarters in Washington, D.C. Specific cases illustrate this blind spot. In Yellowstone, a 2014 Ranger report, later leaked, described finding oversized footprints near a closed trail after a wildlife incident. The area was shut down for bear activity with no further details released. In Olympic National Park, Washington, a 1990s hiker encounter involved a group spotting a hairy figure crossing a ridge. The report was filed but attributed to a costumed prankster, despite no evidence of human involvement. The NPS's response protocol is telling. Incidents are handled internally via the Incident Management System, which prioritizes safety and resource protection over transparency. If evidence like footprints or hair is collected, it's sent to labs like the NPS's Wildlife Health Branch or external partners, but results rarely return to the public domain. Missing persons cases amplify this. David Pallady's Missing 411 series documents over 1,400 disappearances in national parks since the early 1900s, with clusters in areas like Yosemite, over 50 cases, and the Great Smoky Mountains. Many involve odd details. Children found miles away uphill, clothing removed in cold weather, or shoes neatly placed. NPS policy on these is opaque. Searches are coordinated with local SAR teams, but full reports are often withheld under FOIA exemption for ongoing investigations. This control ensures that Bigfoot-related speculation never gains official traction, keeping the parks as blind spots where anomalies vanish into bureaucracy. When evidence enters the system, here's what civilians don't understand. Once evidence enters a federal system, It stops belonging to reality. It becomes administrative. Let's say a ranger finds something. Footprints too large to be human. Hair that doesn't match a known species. Bone fragments that don't fit databases. Well, here's the process. It gets logged as unidentified biological material. It gets forwarded upward. It leaves local control, and it never comes back. It's not destroyed. It's reclassified. At that point, it no longer exists as Bigfoot evidence. It exists as protected material. To unpack this, consider the chain of custody in federal agencies. A ranger in, say, Shasta Trinity National Forest discovers 17-inch footprints with dermal ridges. Per USFS protocol, it's documented in Form 5100-24, an incident report, classified as unidentified wildlife sign. Samples are bagged, tagged, and sent to regional labs on the National Wildlife Forensics Laboratory in Ashland, Oregon, which handles DNA analysis for FWS. If inconclusive, it might go to the Smithsonian or university partners under confidentiality agreements. Real examples abound. In 1976, the FBI analyzed hair samples from Peter Byrne of the Bigfoot Information Center, concluding that they were deer hair, but only after a formal request and a 43-year wait for declassification. In the 1980s, hair from a Washington sighting was tested by the University of British Columbia, showing primate characteristics, but no match to any known species. The report was shelved. Bone fragments from Oregon in 2005 were reclassified as ungulate remains, despite initial anomalies. Once reclassified, evidence falls under protections like the Archaeological Resources Protection Act or Endangered Species Act precursors, making it protected material, inaccessible to the public. This administrative alchemy turns potential proof into paperwork, ensuring Bigfoot remains unconfirmed. And why FOIA requests always fail? The Freedom of Information laws are marketed as transparency. They aren't. They're filters. Anything tied to environmental protection, national security, tribal land, ongoing research, unidentified biological specimens can be legally delayed, denied, or redacted into meaninglessness. And denial doesn't mean nothing was found. It means something was found that cannot be discussed. FOIA, enacted in 1966, requires federal agencies to release records upon request, but with 9 exemptions. Exemption 3, statutory prohibitions. 5, internal deliberations. And 7, law enforcement, are frequently invoked for Bigfoot-related queries. For instance, a 2019 FOIA to the NPS for Bigfoot reports yielded heavily redacted logs citing privacy and ongoing investigations. A 2024 request to the USFS for Gifford Pinchot records was denied under Exemption 3, referencing the National Forest Management Act's protection for sensitive species. Denials are rampant. The FBI's 1970s Bigfoot file, released in 2019, showed testing but no conclusions beyond deer hair. DHS's Intelligence and Analysis FOIA logs from 2024 include denials for amendments to Bigfoot-related appeals, invoking statutes like the Intelligence Authorization Act. Even Justice Department's OIP logs show partial grants with redactions for various FOIA requests. These filters ensure that ties to environmental laws, ESA, security, military overlaps, or tribal sovereignty under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act block access. A denial isn't absence. It's a signal that the material is too sensitive for release, perpetuating the cover-up through legal means. The classified ecology problem. Now we hit the real nerve. The scenario agencies fear most is not paranormal. It's biological. What if Bigfoot is real? Not supernatural, not biological, a relic hominid, rare, intelligent, territorial, indigenous. That single classification collapses systems overnight. Classified ecology frames Bigfoot as a potential undiscovered primate, perhaps a descendant of Gigantopithecus, an extinct Asian ape. Biological reality would trigger taxonomic classifications by International Commission of Zoological Nomenclature, placing it in hominid alongside humans, gorillas, and chimpanzees. Rarity? Estimated populations under 10,000 based on sighting densities would invoke ESA protections. Intelligence, inferred from evasion tactics and tools used in reports, could raise ethical questions under animal welfare laws. Territorial behavior, seen in rock throwing incidents, might classify habitats as crucial. Indigenous status aligns with native legends, positioning Bigfoot as pre-Columbian, challenging land use paradigms. The collapse is multifaceted. Economically, habitat protections could halt $10 billion in annual logging revenues. Legally, it upends wildlife management under the Multi-Use Sustained Yield Act. Culturally, it validates indigenous knowledge, potentially reopening treaties. Agencies like FWS and USFS, tasked with biodiversity, would face mandates to study and protect, but the fear is systemic disruption. This isn't paranoia. It's the nerve of acknowledging a hidden ecosystem player that rewrites biology overnight. Endangered species law would stop the country cold. If Bigfoot is acknowledged as a living species, logging stops, mining stops, development halts, entire regions become protected land, not temporarily, forever. Billions of dollars vanish overnight. No politician survives that admission. No agency volunteers for it. The ESA, passed in 1973, protects species listed as endangered or threatened, prohibiting take, like harm or kill, etc., and requiring habitat conservation plans. If Bigfoot, Homo sasquatchinus, perhaps, were listed, its range in the Pacific Northwest, the Rockies, the Appalachians, would trigger critical habitat designations across millions of acres. Logging, generating $23 billion annually in the West, would cease in key areas like Tongass National Forest, Alaska, or Willamette National Forest, Oregon. Mining for gold, copper, and coal in states like Montana and Idaho, valued at $100 billion, would face moratoriums under Section 7 consultations. The real implications? Scalamina County, Washington, declared Bigfoot endangered in 1969, fining killers $10,000 or imprisonment. If federal, this scales up. Development like pipelines, Keystone XL, or housing in wilderness edges halts. Economic fallout, job losses in timber, 200,000 workers. Mining and related industries, 500,000 workers. Politicians reliant on resource lobbies couldn't endorse it. Agencies avoid it to prevent budget battles. The stoppage isn't hyperbole. It's the ESA's track record with species like the spotted owl, which curtailed logging by 90% in the 1990s, costing billions of dollars. Bigfoot's admission would be an economic ice age. Tribal treaties become unavoidable. If Bigfoot existed before European settlement, then indigenous oral histories weren't legends. They were documentation. That means treaties get reopened. Land rights get challenged. Sovereignty arguments explode. The government doesn't want that conversation. Not now, not ever. Native American tribes have long described Bigfoot-like beings, Salish, Sasquatch, as a forest guardian. Lakota, Chi Tanka, big elder brother, or Hoopa, Aman, a wild man. These aren't myths. They're ecological knowledge predating Columbus. Acknowledgement violates them as historical records, invoking the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie, or the 1868 Sioux Treaty, which ceded lands but reserved rights. Reopening treaties under the Indian Claims Commission Act could challenge cessions. Land rights. Tribes like the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs and Oregon claim ancestral territories overlapping hotspots. Sovereignty. The American Indian Self-Determination Act amplifies claims. Government resistance is evident in cases like the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, where cultural sites were ignored. Bigfoot as indigenous would explode arguments, demanding co-management of lands under the Native American Graves Protection and Reparations Act. This conversation threatens federal control over 56 million acres of Indian lands and billions in resources, explaining the avoidance. Military overlap, the detail that never goes away. Here's a fact nobody likes to sit with. Bigfoot hotspots overlap heavily with military training zones. That's not folklore, that's geography. Bases like Fort Stewart, Georgia, 280,000 acres, Fort Lewis in Washington, 90,000 acres, and Camp Pendleton in California, 125,000 acres, border or encompass wilderness. BFRO maps show sighting clusters over 50 at Fort Lewis since the 1970s, including vocalizations and rock throwings. Geography drives this. Remote terrains ideal for training mimic Bigfoot habitats, dense forests, mountains, rivers. Not coincidence, it's shared space with military secrecy cloaks anomalies. And why soldiers don't talk? When soldiers report encounters, it goes through command. It gets reframed as wildlife, or stress, or sleep deprivation, but the reports don't disappear. They get sealed. Because if troops encounter something that moves silently, avoids infrared, knows terrain better than humans, observes without engaging, that's not a story. That's a security concern. Military protocol. Reports via chain of command, logged in after action reviews, potentially classified under DoD Directive 5200.01, reframing as wildlife or fatigue, dismisses them. Sealing under FOIA Exemption 1 National Security. Examples. In 1993, Oregon exercise where Sergeant Tom Neese saw multiple Bigfoot. The report was sealed. 2004, Fort Stewart squad encounter in the swamps. They reframed it as unknown animal. Security concern. Evasion of night vision. Territory mastery could imply advanced capabilities treated like unidentified threats. The absence of combat reports. Do you notice what's missing here? No confirmed firefights, no trophies, no kill confirmations. That doesn't mean contact never happened. It means it did. You will never see that report, not buried, but classified beyond civilian reach. When Bugs described killing 2 Bigfoot on Art Bell's show in 2001, he claimed that he had shot 2 Bigfoot in 1976, about 8 or 9 feet tall, 1 male, 1 female. But the most revealing part wasn't the creatures. It was what followed. There was no investigation, no recovery attempt, no public inquiry. In a country that investigates everything? Silence is not confusion. It's a decision. And let's talk about the missing persons file nobody wants opened. Thousands vanish in wilderness areas. Official explanations are always tidy. Exposure, falls, disorientation, wildlife got them. But some cases don't fit. Shoes found neatly placed, bodies discovered up hills, victims located miles from their last known position, clothing removed in freezing conditions. Search and rescue veterans talk quietly about cases they're not to discuss. Not because they're paranormal, because they don't fit the approved explanations. This is why Robert W. Morgan was so careful. Listen to Morgan closely. He never overcommitted. He never accused directly. He never crossed certain lines. That's not caution. That's experience. He knew exactly how far he could go before the door was closed. He didn't want to cause friction because with friction, funding dries up, permits stall, access gets denied, academic credibility gets questioned. Nobody tells you to stop. They just make continuing impossible. And eventually, you do. And why bodies are the line that can't be crossed? Every debate ends here, right? No body, no proof. But ask the better question. Who benefits most from a body never surfacing? Well, let's look at government benefits. They avoid ESA, treaties. Bodies would force acknowledgement, rapid recovery without explanation. When something serious is found, areas close quietly, trails reroute, helicopters appear without announcement, official reasons stay vague, the public sees weather closures. Behind the scenes, recovery happens fast, too fast, and that speed tells you everything. Mount St. Helens, 1980. Rumors of the Army Corps airlifting burned Bigfoot bodies from the Toutle River. Closure, helicopters, vague debris removal. Speed indicates protocol for anomalies. What if the body isn't entirely animal? Here's the thought nobody says out loud. What if Bigfoot is biologically close enough to us that classification becomes legally or morally impossible? Not animal, not human, but something in between. That's not a discovery. That's a crisis. And the hybrid status? Well, I can tell you this. Ridicule is policy. The most effective cover-up isn't secrecy. It's mockery. Once something becomes a joke, it's untouchable. T-shirts, cartoons, mascots, reality TV, blah, blah, blah. Bigfoot becomes harmless. And anything harmless never needs denying. And mockery in the media, the Finding Bigfoot show, mascots like Squatch, that discredits serious inquiry. And why Bigfoot is allowed to exist, but only as a punchline? Because nobody investigates a joke, and anyone who tries usually becomes one. That's cheaper than suppression, cleaner than denial, and it's permanent. USDA's 2015 April Fool's Sasquatch post. Permanent deflection. The cover-up's core truth. This isn't a movie conspiracy. No smoke-filled rooms, no villains, it's worse. It's systemic avoidance. Bigfoot doesn't need to be hidden. It only needs to remain unconfirmed. And every institution involved is perfectly designed to keep it that way, to keep it covered up. So now you've heard all three angles. Conspiracy says something ancient survives. Coincidence says the mind fills the dark. Cover-up says truth is inconvenient. And the most unsettling answer of them? They don't cancel each other out. They stack up on top of each other. So next, we are going to look at the most chilling of all, the real encounters with real people in the paranormal section, coming up right after this break. You have been listening to WCAK 1124 AM here in the Dark Zone. We will be right back right after this message.
Most campers fear bears. Seasoned woodsmen fear something else. Something on two legs that stops when you stop. That's why they carry Oasis Bear and Bigfoot repellent spray. High pressure canister, directional nozzle. A scent profile that sends wildlife fleeing and makes larger, Unconfirmed species rethink their approach. Rangers say it's just bear deterrent. Coincidence? But hunters tell another story. Tree knocks cut short, shadows pulling back, heavy breathing retreating fast. Some claim Oasis uses oils not found in any wildlife registry. Others whisper a cover-up, that the spray isn't defense, it's negotiation. Clip it to your pack, keep a finger on the trigger. Oasis bear and Bigfoot repellent spray, or encounters you'll never report. And remember to make Oasis your basis for life.
Conspiracy. Coincidence cover up. Cover up. Stay awake. Stay aware. Nothing is ever as it seems. Nothing is ever as it seems.
Welcome back to the Matrix of the Mind, where we have been in a deep dive on Bigfoot, here on WCAK 1124 AM. In this special segment 4, the paranormal section, I will play a segment from Art Bell as he talks with Bugs, a man who shot and killed 2 Bigfoot in 1976. It's their first conversation ever. I will phone interview Daniel Runningfoot as he tells a chilling encounter with a Sasquatch and tells us about Native American views on the matter. I will read an email about 2 hikers that were chased by a Bigfoot, and I will read 2 emails from a husband and wife encounter while camping that had very different accounts of what happened, even though they were in the same tent. Let's start this section off with Art Bell.
Dear Art Bell, I know where 2 Bigfoots are buried. In 1973, 2 friends and myself were out hunting at night using spotlights. Came across 1 Bigfoot in an open field. He was about 100 yards away. 2 of us shot and dropped him. He got up, we fired again. He went down a second time. He got up again and started for the river. This time he was about 250 yards out. We fired again, hit him, but he did not drop. The next morning, we returned to the area and started to track him. It was easy since there was a lot of blood. We followed him down the river for about a half mile, came up on a large wild plum thicket. The blood trail went in there. We flipped a coin and the odd man went in. It was December, there were no leaves. I crawled in on my stomach, and about 50 feet in, that's 50 feet, I met with the female. Thank God for the .44 Magnum. It took 3 shots to bring her down. Each time I fired, she went backwards. She stood up, and my 2 buddies each fired, hitting her in the head. That was the end of it. We found the male dead in the thicket. Female had the same body as that of a human, sex organ, breast, and so forth. Male had the same type of organs as a human. The difference, though, was that of the face that looked like a cross between a human and ape. The male was about 7.5 feet tall, his weight about 350 pounds. The female, 7 feet tall and 300 pounds. Since they looked so human, we decided to bury them. We felt that we might get charged with murder. All 3 Vietnam vets were snipers, so we knew what we were doing. We took 10 Polaroid photographs, pictures. If you want to talk to me, then I will fax you my number. Just say the word Bugs, and I will fax the number to you. If I agree to show you where they are, and if I need an attorney, your company will pay the bill. That is the only way. Well, while my company is certainly not prepared to foot the bill, the Bigfoot Society has indicated that with the right conditions, they are. They'll help. They have money. They have resources. They have helicopters. They're very serious about what they're doing with regard to Bigfoot. Now, I just, during this last break, got a simple fax with a way to contact somebody with the pseudonym of Bugs. He's on the phone right now, and here he is from an undisclosed location. We'll just leave it at that. I don't even right now want to know where you are. But I do want to say thank you for getting back to me.
You're welcome.
I was afraid that you only listened on Sunday evenings and that you wouldn't be up this late.
Well, I was already asleep. My wife was listening to you, and she woke me up.
Woke you up, eh? All right. There's a lot of confusion. People misheard the fact. Some people thought it was 50 yards in that you crawled. It wasn't. It was about, according to the facts, 50 feet, correct?
Right.
Now,
this thicket was, I would say about 50 feet wide by 150 feet long. It was in a draw or ravine or whatever you want to call it, and you could not see down into it, but there was no leaves, so you could see what was in front of you.
All right, let me take you back before this, if I can. The only part, and you may have heard me or your wife may have heard me mention this, that I had a hard time was that the first shots that were taken apparently were taken at night from about 100 yards.
Right.
And I take it what you had in your sights was a biped of some sort up on two legs, right?
Right. Well, when we first seen what it was, we seen the eyes. It was basically reddish. At first, we thought it could be a deer. The eyes were similar, and as we got closer, it was probably. I assumed it was in a crouch or kneeling position, and as we got closer, we came around a bend in the road that went into this flat area that run alongside the river, and it was a plowed field. And we were able to see, as we got closer, when we hit the lights, the pickup lights hit it first, brought the spotlights on it. We're using 500,000 candle-watt quartz beam lights.
Wow.
Back in 1973, we did this basically professionally because we were hunting coyotes, bobcats, coons, that sort of thing, because they were bringing a lot of money.
I've got you.
And as we come around, like I said, when the lights first hit it, we thought that it was a deer with the eyes. And as we got closer, we could see it was something crouched, and when we stopped the pickup, it stood up.
All right, so at first it was crouched down on all fours.
I wouldn't say it was on all fours.
Or you mean kind of crouched down like you...
kneeling or something.
All right, I've got you. Mm-hmm. And so then, as you got closer, it reared up. It got up.
Right. And
how much detail could you make out of this thing?
At the point when we throw the scopes on it, we could tell what it was. I mean, there was no doubt in our mind. Bird Dog and myself both knew immediately what it was. That it was a Bigfoot because the hair, the outline, the human form. But it was so hard to... The excitement, the adrenaline at that point was pumping like you wouldn't believe.
No, I believe it.
And I laid my rifle out my window, and he come across the top of the cab with his. And we both fired simultaneously. I mean, that's the way we did it when we hit coats. Whichever one decided, one of us fire out the driver's side or the window, and the other one come across the cab, and we both fired. And we fired instantly. He was using a 300 Weatherby, which is 300 Magnum. Mm-hmm. I was using a 243.
Okay.
He was shooting I believe either 280. I believe it was a 280 grain bullet, and I was firing a 125 grain bullet. And we both fired. He fell over. I mean, it just like not really fell over, like he was knocked over. I'm assuming the 300 is what did that. We thought he was down. As he come back up,
Okay, I'm not an expert with guns. I know something about them, but I take it these are of a caliber and velocity that would bring down any normal animal, right?
The 300 bring anything down in northern United States and North America.
Okay.
The 243, no, it's not. It's more of a varmint weapon.
All right.
But the 300, I mean, you could probably bring down an elephant with it.
Okay.
It's probably the most powerful rifle there is in this part of the world outside of an elephant gun. And the animal got up, stood on its hind feet, started to run away from us, and we fired again, and again it was just like something pushed him down. We knocked him down. And again we thought he wasn't going to get up, and we opened our doors, I did, and stepped outside, and Bird Dog come around the front, and he jumped up and he took off again, and this is when we fired the third time. And we hit him again because he kind of lurched forward, but he was further enough out that he went across. He hit the fence, and it just rolled across the fence, and he got down into the river there, and he was gone.
Now, this was all at about what time of night?
I would say probably about 2:30.
2:30 in the morning. All right. Mm-hmm. So that was at the end of what occurred that night.
Right. We didn't. We didn't do any more looking for him that night because this thing is bigger than both of us put together nearly.
Yeah, I wouldn't go in there.
And we knew that he was hit. We knew that he was hit bad. And so
you figured he wouldn't go very far.
No, he's not going to go very far.
So
I mean, been hit at least 3 times or 4 by both weapons. He's not going very far.
Right. And he didn't. You came back when the next day, roughly?
Oh, we didn't even go to sleep. We just kind of drove around until sunlight.
I see.
And I would say probably 7:30, 8. We arrived back over there. We picked up the blood trail. Bird Dog was a tracker in Vietnam. It was very easy for him to follow the trail. And we went down, I imagine about a half a mile, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Come up on the thicket. And that was when we went in after it.
All right. You're the guy, you flipped a coin to see who would go in odd man out, right?
Yeah, I never was very lucky.
So in you go with a .44 Magnum.
Right.
And you got about 50 feet in and found what?
Well, as I was going in, I was scared, to be honest with you, but I just, I never suspected 2 of them. I got in, and the sound that this thing made as it come up at me.
What was that sound? You've heard me play, I assume. That
Nothing like what you play.
Nothing like what I play.
Nothing like. It was more of a scream.
A scream.
I mean, a woman can't scream the squealing sound the way this thing screamed. And it just put chills down your spine. But I seen it move. I seen it coming toward me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on all 4s coming toward me. And I fired, and the .44, I'm shooting a 240 grain hollow point with an overcharge. Literally knocked that thing back about 3 or 4 feet. It got up and it come after me again, and I fired again. It did it 3 times that way. And the 4th time, it stood completely up. And when it did, Bird Dog and my other buddy cut loose on it, and they went through the head.
All right, I take it the thicket was low enough so that when this creature stood up all the way, it was standing high enough so they could get a shot at it.
Right. Probably a plum thicket, I imagine probably 5, 6 foot tall.
Okay.
And something to that extent. Well, it dropped and didn't make no more sounds, and I got closer, and I seen it wasn't breathing, so I knew it was gone. And about another probably 10 foot on the other side of it, I seen the other one laying there. And so it took all 3 of us to drag them out. They were that heavy. And then when we examined them, we got scared because the organs, everything, it was just like a human body with hair on it.
Oh, that was going to be my question. It was covered with hair?
Right. Had a kind of a brownish red hair.
Brownish red. And you estimated the weight, I think the male about 350 pounds, the female about 300, huh?
Something in that neighborhood.
And both of them over 7 feet.
At least. I can promise you that they were at least 7 foot tall. They could have even been taller.
No clothing, right?
No clothing.
The head looking half human?
I don't know how to really explain it.
Best you can.
It had a nose similar to a human's nose, but the mouth similar to an ape. The eyes, half human, half ape looking. It had a large, protruding type forehead.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas ours, kind of comes almost down on your eyes. This one hung probably half an inch or so out more so than ours would.
Did it have a neck?
Short neck.
Very short, huh?
Probably, if I remember right, maybe 3 inches.
That's not much of a neck.
I'll tell you the best way to describe the way they look from the backside. You've seen weightlifters where they don't have no neck and it just goes all up into muscles.
Yeah, sure.
That's the way it looked.
Like a no-necked NFL player.
Right.
Well, look, I can imagine your fear. I mean, what did you guys do when you finally got the bodies? You dragged them out. You looked at them. What was the conversation like?
Well, we started talking about what are we going to do? Should we notify somebody, or should we bury these suckers, or what?
Right.
And we finally come to the conclusion that we might go to prison. And so we decided, hey, let's put these suckers in a hole. And we buried them, and then covered it where nobody'd ever know they'd been buried there.
All right, well, I'm not an attorney, but from what you've told me, you didn't commit murder. I mean, you were hunting, and clearly, I think, if your description is even close to accurate, you did not kill what we think of as human beings. Let me ask you to stay put for just a minute. I've got commercial things I must do, and so without identifying the person, other than to say, this is Bugs, we'll be back in just one moment.
So there it is. Bugs' account of killing 2 Bigfoot in 1976, the very first time that he talked to Art Bell. Now, Art Bell did do a full interview of him in 2001, and that is posted separately on this Dark Zone channel, WCAK 1124 AM, and that has currently around 100,000 views. That might be something else that you want to listen to, because it goes into a little more detail. But there it is. And now, I'm going to read an email to you from Sam and Johnny up in the Seattle area. Now, they had an encounter, and I could barely talk them into sending this email. I wanted to do a phone interview, but they are just done telling anyone what happened to them. They are tired of the ridicule, being told that they were full of it, being told they made all this up. And as a side note, they never made a dime from any of this and have only suffered embarrassment from telling this story. Let me read to you what they sent me. This email is long because we want to give you every detail we remember. No embellishments, just the facts as they unfolded, including our thoughts and fears in the moment. Johnny and I have gone over this draft together multiple times to make sure it's accurate. The whole ordeal spanned a weekend, but the core event, the encounter, and the chase felt like hours compressed into a night. It all started with careful planning in the weeks leading up to the trip. Johnny is the meticulous one. He scoured hiking apps, forums like Washington Trails Association, and All Trails reviews to find the perfect route. We settled on a 25 to 28 mile loop in the North Cascade National Park, starting from the Easy Pass trailhead along Highway 20. This area is known for dramatic scenery. Deep valleys carved by glaciers, rugged peaks piercing the sky, and vast stretches of wilderness with minimal human traffic. The loop involved climbing to high ridges for panoramic views, traversing alpine meadows, and descending through old-growth forests. Elevation gains were moderate, about 3,000 feet total, but the off-trail sections promised adventure. We secured our backcountry permit online, as required, and packed efficiently. Lightweight tents, when mine was a Big Agnes and Johnny's was an REI model. Compact sleeping bags, inflatable pads, a shared Jetboil stove, dehydrated meals from Mountain House, energy bars, trail mix, water filters, headlamps, extra clothing layers for the variable weather, rain gear, trekking poles, a first aid kit stocked with bandages and painkillers, bear spray cans, one for each of us, and my Garmin InReach Mini for emergency satellite communication. There's no cell service out there. Johnny added his multi-tool, a small pair of binoculars, and a lightweight hammock for lounging. I handled navigation with my GPS watch and Topo's map. Total pack weight was around 35 pounds each, which was very manageable for fit guys like us. We hit the road early Friday morning, July 18th, 2025. The drive from Seattle took about 3 hours, winding through the Skagit Valley farmlands before climbing into the mountains. We blasted a playlist of 90s rock and podcasts to pass the time, stopping once in Marble Mount for last-minute snacks and coffee. By 9 a.m., we were at the trailhead, boots on the ground, packs adjusted. The weather was ideal. Sunny with highs in the mid-70s, low humidity and a light breeze. The initial miles were a gentle warm-up through the coniferous forest, towering western red cedars, Douglas firs, and hemlocks forming a canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered through in dappled patterns, illuminating moss-covered boulders and carpets of fern. The trail was well maintained, switchbacking steadily upward. We passed a few day hikers early on, exchanging nods and trail conditions, but soon had the paths to ourselves. Around noon, we crossed a sparkling creek on a sturdy log bridge, the water rushing cold from snowmelt higher up. We paused there for lunch. Peanut butter and jelly tortillas, apples, and a handful of almonds, sitting on rocks with our boots off, feet dangling in the chill water to soothe them. There were no signs of wildlife beyond squirrels scampering and birds flitting around. While energized, we continued the climb, the forest thinning as we gained elevation. Subalpine firs appeared, and soon we broke into meadows bursting with wildflowers, purple lupine, red paintbrush, white bear grass swaying in the wind. By late afternoon, around 5 p.m., we reached our planned campsite in the Fisher Basin area, a beautiful spot beside a small alpine lake ringed by rocky slopes. The water was mirror still, reflecting the surrounding peaks. We chose a flat, established site away from the shore to minimize impact, pitched our tents side by side, and gathered deadwood for a small campfire. That was allowed in that zone with our permit. Dinner was simple but satisfying. Cheesy pasta rehydrated on the stove, followed by chocolate bars for dessert. As the sun set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, we sat by the fire, sharing stories from past hikes. That time that we got lost in the fog on the Wonderland Trail, or that epic thunderstorm in the Enchantments. Johnny pulled out a small flask of bourbon, and we toasted for another great trip that we were having. Night fell quickly in the mountains. The temperature dropped to the 50s, crisp and invigorating. Stars emerged in a blanket overhead. The Milky Way was actually vivid without all the light pollution. We heard the usual symphony, wind whispering through trees, occasional splashes from fish in the lake, distant calls of coyotes or perhaps elk. An owl hooted nearby. There was nothing alarming going on. It was quite beautiful, actually. We zipped into our tents around 10 p.m., exhausted but content, falling asleep to the rhythmic sound of our own breathing. Saturday dawned clear, the sun rising over the ridge and warming our tents. We were up by 6:30 a.m., brewing coffee on the stove and eating oatmeal with dried fruit. Broke camp efficiently, everything packed dry thanks to no dew that morning. On the trail by 7:30, aiming for good mileage. The path climbs steeply to Easy Pass itself, the high point at about 6,500 feet. The effort paid off with breathtaking views, jagged summits like Mount Logan and Black Peak, glaciers gleaming blue-white, valleys dropping thousands of feet below. We lingered at the pass for photos and a snack, wind whipping our jackets. Best office view ever, Johnny laughed. From there, the main trail descended, but Johnny had flagged an alternative route from an online search, a faint, unofficial path branching off towards a less visited ridge and hidden valley. Forum posts described it as challenging but rewarding, with thick brush, potential berry foraging, and high chances of wildlife sightings like deer, bears, or even mountain goats. I remember telling him, "Let's do it. We want more adventure." We found the junction marked subtly by stacked rocks and veered onto the spur. Immediately, the going got rougher. The trail narrow and overgrowth with solace bushes, huckleberries, and alder saplings. We pushed through, using poles to part vegetation, scratches starting to form on our forearms from all the thorns. By mid-morning, the ridge walk offered intermittent views, but mostly we were enclosed in green tunnels. Around 11 a.m., Johnny, scouting ahead, called back softly to me, "Sam, you gotta see this." In a muddy patch softened by recent rain, a massive footprint pressed deep into the soil. It was humanoid in shape, 5 toes, broad heel, arched instep, but enormous. Easily 18 inches long, 8 inches wide. The edges were sharp, fresh, with no overlapping marks. Johnny placed his size 11 hiking boot beside it for comparison. His looked like a child's. "What the hell?" he whispered. I remember it clearly. We examined closely. No claw impressions like a bear would leave. No tread from shoes. The stride to the next partial print suggested something tall and heavy. I remember thinking out loud, could this be a prank? Though it felt very unlikely this far out. Johnny took multiple photos, zooming on details like what appeared to be skin ridges in the impression. A chill ran down my spine despite the warming sun. We joked nervously, and I remember saying, "Bigfoot, welcome, Matt?" But we pressed on with the heightened awareness. The forest suddenly felt less empty to us. We stopped for lunch around 1 p.m. in a small grassy opening on the ridge. We sat on our packs, eating tuna packets on crackers and getting water from our bladders. A faint musky odor drifted across on the breeze. It was strong, animalistic, like wet fur mixed with garbage. We sniffed around, searched the area, but we found no source. And I remember Johnny saying out loud, was it a bear maybe? Then came the first anomalous sound. A deep whoop echoing from the valley below, long and wavering, rising in pitch before cutting off. It wasn't a bird call or an elk bugle. It was too resonant. It was almost vocal. We froze for a minute and we just stood there listening. Minutes passed in the silence. I don't know, our imagination, I remember telling Johnny. But I said it, and then my pulse started to quicken. We packed hastily and continued on. The path deteriorated further. Bushwhacking required now. Following game trails through dense undergrowth, Devil's Club with its irritating spines, vine maple tangles, fallen logs slick with moss. Well, the sweat started to pour, and we paused often to drink and catch our breath. Then the wood knocks, sharp raps like baseball bats striking trunks. Talk, talk. Then there'd be a pause, then. Talk, talk, talk. From different directions, as if responding. I remember Johnny asking, "Is that Hunter signaling?" We called out, "Hello! Hello!" a few times, but no human reply. The knocks ceased, leaving an oppressive quiet. Paranoia crept in. Were we being watched? Branches seemed to be moving without the wind. By 2:30 p.m., after hours of slow progress, we crested a subtle rise and peered down into a secluded bowl-shaped meadow, perhaps 300 to 400 feet across, ringed by steep cliffs and impenetrable old growth on three sides. It was a natural sanctuary, grass lush with wildflowers, a small stream trickled through it, and in the center, foraging peacefully, were three figures that defied explanation. The largest, the male, was immense, standing 8 to 9 feet tall, body covered in thick, dark brown hair with reddish highlights in the sun. Muscular build, broad shoulders sloping into long, powerful arms that nearly reached his knees. His head sat low, no distinct neck, with a pronounced brow ridge and conical crest. He moved with deliberate grace, bending to strip leaves and berries from low shrubs, chewing methodically. Nearby, the female, slightly smaller, perhaps around 7 feet, slimmer frame with longer, wavier hair, sat on a downed log, appearing to watch over a third figure. The juvenile was about 5 feet tall, gangly and energetic, tumbling playfully in the grass, batting at something small, emitting soft chattering sounds. Sal, it was unlike anything that either one of us had ever seen before. It was a family unit, intimate and natural. The young one interacted with the female, who groomed it gently, picking through its fur. The male grunted occasionally, low and rumbling, perhaps communicating locations of food, I don't know. Their movements were fluid, not clumsy, bipedal primarily, but the male knuckled briefly for balance. Faces visibly in profile, broad noses, deep-set eyes reflecting intelligence. No tools, no fire, just primal existence. Johnny and I dropped instinctively behind a cluster of boulders and logs. I know my heart was pounding out of my chest. I remember Johnny saying, "Oh my God." Bigfoot? A whole damn family of Bigfoot? I couldn't speak. Mesmerized and terrified, we were maybe 200 yards away, partially concealed. Johnny shakily pulled his phone, started a video recording, zooming as best he could. The image would later be blurry from tremors and distance, but it captured motion. My mind raced. This is it. Proof of something fringe, paranormal perhaps, or undiscovered primate. But the awe turned into dread when the juvenile suddenly froze. Head snapped towards us. It let out a high-pitched yip, like a yelp, pointing with its long arm. The female reacted first, scooping the young protectively and backing toward the tree line. The male straightened to full height, chest expanding and turned. Those eyes, dark, intense, locked onto our position across the meadow. A low growl built, erupting into a roar that shook the air, vibrating in our chests like thunder. Primal fury, territorial rage. "Run!" Johnny yelled. We bolted upright and fled back along the ridge, crashing through brush without regard for noise or direction. Behind us, the roar echoed again, followed by heavy crashing. The male pursuing. The chase was pure terror. The ridge narrowed dangerously, steep drops on sides, forcing us downhill into thicker vegetation. Footfalls thundered behind, massive weight breaking through branches like gunfire. He was fast, switching to quadrupedal for speed, bounding like an oversized gorilla. We zigzagged desperately, packed slamming against our backs, poles discarded for freer arms. Then the projectiles began. The first rock, grapefruit-sized, whizzed past my head with a whoosh, embedding it in a tree trunk ahead with a crack that showered bark. Force that was incredible, like a major league pitch, but faster. "He's throwing rocks," I screamed over the noise. Another sailed high over Johnny, missing by inches, exploding against a boulder. More followed in rapid succession, accurate enough to terrify, but all just off target, left, right, or overhead. Was he missing intentionally? warning us away from lethal intent, or hurting us like prey. Panic fueled us. Brush-clawed faces and arms, drawing blood. Roots were tripping us, sending us sprawling. I fell hard once, my knee twisting in pain, shooting up my leg. Johnny pulled me up right away. "Keep moving or we're dead," he yelled out. Lungs burning from exertion and altitude. Vision tunneling. Glimpsed back, revealed the pursuer. Dark form closing to 50 yards at times. Eyes gleaming with focus, expression of mixed anger and calculation. The terrain steepened into a scree slope. We half slid, half ran down, dislodging stones on the way. More rocks pelted from above. Some were thrown, some were loose. One clipped Johnny's shoulder, spinning him and throwing him to the ground, and he grunted, but recovered. Roars punctuated the chase, deep and guttural, sometimes joined by distant whoops. Maybe the female calling? The young? We don't know. We plunged into a ravine, splashing through a knee-deep creek. The cold water shocking, but masking scent, perhaps, hopefully. We scrambled up the opposite bank into denser forest. Gradually, the crashing diminished, roars fading to echoes. We didn't stop until exhaustion forced us to, collapsing in a thicket miles away, gasping, listening. Only normal forest sounds then returned. That night, we camped hidden off any path. No fire, eating cold food in silence. Fear lingered. What if he had tracked us? What if he knows where we're at? Sleep eluded us that night. We didn't see him again. Sunday, we hiked out urgently, reaching the car by early afternoon. We drove home, pretty stunned and just quiet. Bodies all bruised and scratched, still a little bloody. Evidence tangible. Back in Seattle, we reviewed Johnny's media. Footprint photos were clear and compelling. The video was shaky but showing upright figures. We shared it with a couple of trusted friends, and reactions ranged from belief to complete doubt. That trip changed us. We will never go back into the woods again. Best regards, Sam and Johnny in Seattle. I have left an open interview to Sam and Johnny, either one or the both of them, to do a live phone interview about this whole subject, about this whole encounter that they went through. They are still reluctant, but it's a lifetime open request. If they want to at any time, and I'll check with them from time to time, you will hear it here on Conspiracy, Coincidence, or Cover-Up in the Dark Zone, WCAK, 1124 AM. Now, I did get a phone interview with Daniel Runningfoot, an elder Native American up in the northwest of the United States. I don't want to say exactly where he's at because he did not want to disclose exactly where he was at, and that's fine. But I did get him on the phone, and we're going to do that interview right now. Daniel, are you there? Are you with us?
Hey there, Sal. Just got settled by the wood stove after checking on the chickens. Rain's coming down hard here in the northwest. Rivers are swelling. Air smells fresh. New Year feels like the old one so far, but my coffee's hot, and I've got time. So let's talk.
Sounds great. I really appreciate it. And for our listeners, this is a special long-form phone interview with Daniel Runningfoot, a respected 68-year-old Native American elder living somewhere in the misty forests of the Pacific Northwest. Daniel's sharing generations of knowledge about Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, as it's often called in Native traditions, including folklore, cultural insights, and some deeply personal experiences. Daniel, if you're good, let's ease into it. In your people's stories and beliefs, who exactly is Bigfoot? Not the pop culture version, but the real deal from your perspective.
Well, first thing, Sal, we don't usually say Bigfoot. That's a newspaper word from outsides in the 1950s. In our family, he is the hairy man, the wild one.
Sasquatch, Stick Indian, Seatcoal. Names vary by region and dialect. He's not a monster and not a cartoon. He's ancient, woven into the land and the spirit world. The elders say he was here before our ancestors came down from the north, back when the ice carved these valleys. He's like an elder sibling to the wolves, the elk, the bears, but wiser and fiercer, more elusive. His job is balance. When the force thrives, he stays hidden. When greed or disrespect shows up, he steps out. Not for sport. He reminds people that the land isn't theirs to own. My grandmother told me a story from around 1910. Summer camp, up in the mountains, families gathering berries and hunting deer. Game was thin and kids were getting skinny. The adults were talking about breaking camp early. One foggy morning, the hunters were coming back empty, but the tree line there they were, 4 bucks, laid out in a perfect row. Throats slit clean. Guts piled neatly aside, not a drop of blood spray around anywhere. Just huge footprints 18, 19 inches long, coming from and returning to the deep timber. The elders nodded, said the hairy man provided because the people showed respect. They cooked a feast, but first they left smoked salmon and tobacco on a stump as a thank you. The deer returned a few days later. You see, that's the lesson. Harmony, peace, and unity.
So, when the stories were handed down, it sounds like compassion showed up.
Well, compassion when it's earned. But balance cuts both ways. My father's uncle was a trapper in the 1930s up in the Cascades. Rugged country, deep gorges, skies that got blocked by the trees. He was good, but he was greedy. He'd strip whole beaver dams for pelts. One winter, he set traps in a valley the elders called off limits, the resting place for the old spirits, with hot springs and ancient carvings. First few days went normal. Then the wood knocks, hollow thuds echoing across ridges, deliberate. Well, he ignored them. Next trip, half his traps were sprung but empty, steel jaws bent. He reset all the traps. The next week, every trap is destroyed. Stakes snapped, steel twisted like soft wire, his tent shredded, his gear scattered and thrown down the slope. And the smell of sulfur, wet fur, rot, they're all sticking to his clothes. Tracks surrounded the place, big tracks, 17, 18, 19-inch size. He looked back and saw a silhouette on the ridge, broad shoulders, long arms, and head cocked. The eyes, they weren't furious, he says. He said they looked disappointed, like a parent maybe saying, enough already. He quit trapping and took up fishing. That story taught our kids the forest has rules.
Wow, disappointed eyes? I mean, that seems like it hits harder than rage.
Yes, that's because Sasquatch, he's sentient. He understands. Another story from the 1940s. My grandfather's hunting buddy got lost in the fog. He heard his brother calling his name, clear as day. But his brother was 30 miles away at another camp. He followed the voice deeper. Something started to feel wrong, like the voice came from a cave or underwater. When he stopped trusting his ears and turned back, he found his way back. The elders told him the hairy man was testing him. Curiosity and greed can get you killed out there. The voice mimicry you hear in these modern reports, that's nothing new.
No, it's not something new. And that mimic stuff is some of the eeriest Bigfoot lore today. I have a recording taken from an Art Bell interview. Let me play it, and you tell me, Daniel, have you heard this before, or does it sound like a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch yell to you? I mean, I don't know about you, Daniel, but that raises the hair on the back of my neck every time that I hear it.
Yes, Sal. I've heard sounds like that before, deep in the woods. But there's more to Sasquatch's sounds he can mimic. He can sound like a human calling you from the woods. He can sound like another animal. There's more to it. An old woman named Mary told me a story from her childhood in the 1940s near the coast. She and her sister were gathering berries when they heard a baby crying. But not an exact baby. The weird, throaty kind that didn't sound just quite right. They pushed through the brush and saw a female Sasquatch sitting on a moss-covered log. Long, dark hair with reddish highlights. On her back was a smaller one, maybe 4 feet tall, climbing, chatting, curious. The mother turned, looked at the girls, and let out a soft hoot. Not aggressive, just acknowledging. The girls backed away and left their baskets behind. They never picked that spot again, without leaving offerings. Mary swore the little one's face was the most human thing she had ever seen. Very innocent, just curious.
So, Daniel, that implies to me that there is family orientation with the Sasquatch.
Yes, exactly, Sal. Tribal, even. They have clans. Seasonal movement, foraging, shelters built from woven branches. We call them nests. They eat roots, berries, fish. Take deers when needed. Some tales say he dries meat in caves over small fires using flint. He's not primitive, just adapted. Mainstream media paints him like a dumb ape. That's very, very wrong.
Fire and tools? That's a paradigm shift for most listeners, including myself, and I'm in no way a Sasquatch expert. I'm learning from everything that's been on this particular podcast, so wow, that's definitely a shift for most listeners.
Well, Sal, let me tell you, there is a legend about a child lost in a storm. Lightning, wind, rain for days. Family searches until their voices are gone. On the 4th night, they see smoke from a ravine they've searched already. They find the girl asleep by a tiny fire wrapped in moss and ferns. Her belly is full of berries. The prints around her were massive. She said a tall, furry friend carried her, fed her, and hummed a quiet tune to her to calm her. We left offerings there for many, many years after.
So, Sasquatch is a guardian of the woods when intent is pure.
Yes, exactly, Sal. But the smells and sounds are the warnings. The odor, like wet dog fur, hot springs, rot, it's unmistakable. It means he's close and watching. The vocalization, the whoops, the howls, the screams, they shake you to your bone. I heard one myself in my 20s near the Canadian border. Clear summer night. Campfire was low. Was 3 rising whoops coming across the lake. So we whooped back. There was an immediate reply, much closer. Then the scream hit, deep in the chest to a piercing shriek, vibrating our ribs. The dogs we had went wild. We fed the fire and we sat back to back with knives. No sleep that night. The next morning we found snapped limbs 15 feet up and footprints along the shore. They must have been 17, 18 inches. No paw marks. They had dermal ridges that were visible. We sketched them to show the others. We didn't need plaster to know the truth, Sal.
Well, you've seen him more than once, right?
Oh yeah, enough times to respect him. About 10 years ago, I was fly fishing at dawn. Sun turning mist golden. The birds go silent. Smell rolls in. And upstream, a tall figure stands in the shallows catching salmon with his hands. Moves smooth and efficient. He sees me. He flings 2 salmon onto my bank and slips into the brush without sound. I left tobacco on a rock and went home. Another time hiking, I felt eyes on me. Hard and heavy steps pacing parallel, stopping when I stopped. I never saw him that time, but I left jerky on a stump and thanked the spirits. The feeling lifted away.
Well, those are mutual acknowledgments.
That's right. But the big one, The one that shaped me was when I was 16. Fall of 1974. My rite of passage, my solo hunt. Bring back meat, prove you can survive. I carried a handmade recurve bow, a dozen stone-tipped arrows, a knife, demicon, water. Left camp before dawn. The shadow valleys were old-growth cedar and hemlock, dark and damp with devil's club, moss, and ferns that were chest high. I tracked elk signs for hours. Worm droppings, fresh shrub, and broken twigs. Forest was alive with birds and squirrels. Around midday, that all changed. Birds, they went silent. The wind died. The air felt like it got heavy. Then the smell hit. The sulfur smell. The smell of wet fur and rot, thick enough to make me gag. I knew what it meant, but 16-year-old pride had pushed me forward. The trees opened into a clearing I'd never seen, bowl-shaped, boulders around the rim, a creek through the center. Fog clung to it despite the sun. Light felt wrong. It was golden but cold, and shadows long like evening. And there he was, crouched by the creek, washing berries or drinking, I'm not sure. Reddish brown hair tangled with moss and twigs. He rose slowly, 7 to 9 feet maybe, arms thick, long, and a heavy brow, flat nose with a wide jaw. He faced me, and her eyes locked. They were dark, intelligent eyes. He grunted, deep and resonant. My bow was half drawn, but my body froze. He took 2 steps towards me, ground thumping under his feet. I stumbled backwards and fell. Then the fog surged in like it had intent, coiling and swallowing and clearing. Daylight dimmed to twilight in seconds, and the whispers began, and it was not English, not modern tongues, old languages I'd heard fragments of in sweat lodges. They were twisted and layered. They came from everywhere, the trees, the rocks, the air, inside my skull. The clearing stretched and warped at the edges like a dream melting. The hairy man moved through it slowly, like time had thickened around him. He reached out a long arm towards me, fingers extended, the nails dark. I shut my eyes and whispered a prayer my grandmother had taught me, words asking for protection from spirits of the land. The whispers faltered. The fog thinned. Light turned like someone lifting a curtain. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was normal again. No warping, no whispers. He stood across the creek staring at me. Not angry, not curious, just studying me. He let out a low moan, sad, almost, and turned away into the trees. No crashing, no branches snapping, just gone. I lay there shaking until the birds started to sing again. Walked back to the camp, empty-handed, pale as paper. The elders did not scold me. They listened. One old man told me, he showed you the other side. Not everyone comes back from that. I didn't speak of it again for decades. Not because I feared mockery, but because I didn't have words that fit.
So, Daniel, we're running low on time right now, but I want to ask you, so what was the other side in your view?
Sasquatch isn't just flesh and blood. He walks in 2 worlds, the physical and the spirit. Some of the old people say he was born that way. Others say he was shaped by the first buyers of the world when animals still talked to men. Either way, he isn't trapped the way we are. He could step between layers of reality the way you and I can step between rooms. Out in the deep timber, there are places the elders call thin places, spots where the air feels heavier but the world feels lighter, where sound moves strange and time gets slippery. Hunters talk about following elk tracks into a valley in the morning and climbing out at what feels like noon, only to find the sun completely setting. You'll hear wood knocks, with no echo, like the sound gets swallowed. The birds don't sing. The wind doesn't bother stirring the leaves. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath. Those are places where the veil fades, and those are the places that he favors. When you step into those places with arrogance, full of pride, disrespect, or greed, that's when the Wild One tests you. And he tests different men in different ways. Some people see a hulking ape, all muscular and hair, something they can categorize a mile away like a zoo specimen. Others catch a glimpse of something that feels older than the trees, something with eyes that understands them better than they understand themselves. And then there are the ones who vanish. No blood, no tracks leading out, no broken branches, just gone, like the land took them back. The old belief is it depends on what you carry inside, your intentions, your spirit, your shadow, but Wild One mirrors it back to you.
Well, Daniel Running Wolf,
Yes.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this phone interview with me and sharing your experiences and your views of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Hairy Man, whichever you call him. I want to thank you.
Yes, Sal. You take care.
So, did you guys notice the similarities between Daniel Runningfoot and Sam and Johnny's encounters? I did. I noticed several things that lined up and matched in there. And also, going back to the Bugs interview with Art Bell, Daniel Runningfoot mentioned something several times, and his tone in the interview seemed to be that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whichever you want to call him, is a guardian. And he doesn't normally come around if everything's okay, if everything is being respected in the land. But he shows up when things are disrespected. And I have to think back to that Bugs interview. Bugs was out there, and I'm not one to criticize people, and I'm not judging anybody. He was out there trying to make a living, from what I understand, as a hunter. But was he taking advantage of the land? Was he taking too many pelts just for greed and for money? Well, I guess I'll just let you guys think about that. Now, we're going to get into one more set of emails here. That's a husband and wife team, Bart and Terry, and they're both professionals. But the thing that they used to love to do was go camping together and get out in the woods and get away from all of the professional things that they had to do. And I tried to get them to do a phone interview, and I just could not, with their schedules, we could not do it before this show was going to be recorded. So, with that being said, they did send in emails. And so I'm going to read Bart's first, and then I'm going to read Terry's. But the one thing that we have to look at here is they both obviously were together on this camping trip, and they were in the same tent. But the reason why there's two emails is because they could not come to a head, and still cannot come to a head, on what they believe the encounter was. The way each one of them saw it was very different from each other. So I had them just write two separate emails describing what they thought they saw in their own words. So let's get into that one right now. I'm going to read you Bart's email now. Hi, Sal. You already saw our joint message. This is just me talking. Bart. I'm not speaking for Terry. She's sending her own because we did not process this weekend the same way. And honestly, the difference matters. Okay, this was July 2018, outside Buena Vista, Colorado. It was high elevation, 3 days, there was no people, no nonsense, just trees, rocks, sky, and a long-ass meadow that felt like it was a runway for ghosts. We hiked in around noon. Everything looked normal, felt normal, weather was good, air was thin as hell. I've done a ton of backcountry and nothing pinged on my alarm except the silence. Not, oh, it's peaceful silence, more like someone unplugged the forest silence. No bugs, no birds, no nothing, just like dead air. I remember thinking, that seems weird, but then just moving on. The next morning, we find tracks near the tree line. bare feet, humanish, but huge, 18 inches at least. The heel, the toe, everything. Dry ground, but deep impressions and long strides. I'm standing there trying to picture the kind of dude who's barefoot, 300 plus pounds, and casually walking 5-foot strides through the mountains. Yeah, no. Terry drops her hydro flask next to the one for scale, and I check the soil with my hand. It wasn't cutouts. Ground was legitimately compacted. Later, we go down to the creek and find a pine with a fresh gouge in it. Resin still glistening. Same type of prints around it. Then we hear breathing behind the tree. Not a deer, not a bear, just this slow, heavy inhale and a long, controlled exhale, like someone with massive lungs trying not to make noise. We both freeze, then quietly back off. A couple seconds later, there's a solid thunk deeper in the trees, like someone hitting a log with a bat, but it was like dead, no echo. There was no screaming, there was no running. We just left because that felt like the correct move to do. We get back to camp, and inside our tent, inside, dead center on Terry's sleeping pad, there's a pine cone. Not tossed in, placed perfectly in the center. The tent door wasn't open, so that means something opened it, set it there, and closed it again. That implies hands and intent while we weren't there. There's also this long black coarse hair stuck to it. Not hers, not mine, not from any dog or horse. I just pretended it was nothing because my brain rejected the alternative. Around 11:30 on the second night, the forest wakes up. First, it's little stone clicks from 2 different spots. Then a whistle that wasn't a bird, and I say that as someone who knows birds out there. Then footsteps. Not 4-legged, 2. They're heavy and deliberate. They don't walk straight at us. They circle, cutting distance slowly like they're running some kind of approach pattern. Breathing gets closer, and it's not panting, it's controlled and powerful. Then the tent wall drags inward, like 5 fingers slowly raking down it. Every hair on my body stands up. Terry flips her camera on and just points at the fabric. Then a head presses into the tent, enough to dome the whole wall inward. Too high for a bear, wrong shape for elk. Breath fogs up the nylon. Then it makes a sound, a low, vibrating like, not speech, not mimicry, just something trying to push a valve through a wrong equipment or something. Then the knocks start up. 3 close, 2 farther away, and then 1 way out there. That tells me we're dealing with more than just 1, at least a minimum 3. Eventually, the one at our tent just leaves. No rush, like it had somewhere else to be or something. At first light, we find tracks doing loops around our tent. Some close, some wide, like they were mapping us, like recon work. Then we see a young pine, twisted, not snapped, but twisted. Bark spiraled like candy, cotton candy type thing. We grab a same-sized one and try to twist it ourselves. And it doesn't move, not even a little bit. We didn't have that kind of strength. We packed everything in under 20 minutes and didn't say a single word until we hit the car. The footage we got is mostly audio. The tent bowing in and shadow movement, breathing if you wear headphones. The knocks too. There was no face, no body. You know, it seemed like these things knew how to stay out of view. I'm not labeling it. I'm not giving you a cryptide or a hominide or any of that. I'm just telling you what happened. If you air this, don't cut the physical stuff, the prints, the tree torque, the breathing, the recon behavior, the object placement, the intelligent without speech. That's the part that stuck with me. Terry will send hers. She caught stuff I didn't. Doesn't make it wrong, just different brains, different filters, thinking a different way. Bart. All right. Well, Bart's not telling us exactly that he saw a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, but it sure sounds like he did. It sure sounds like he had an encounter, like they did. So let's listen to Terry's encounter and see how it differs or what she picked up differently from Bart. Hi, Sal. I'm sending my version of the same weekend Bart wrote about. If his email was the bones, then I guess mine is the skin. I'm not contradicting him. We were in the same tent, but we did not experience the same reality, or if we did, his brain just filtered it completely differently. I'll start like he did. It was Buena Vista, July 2018. That was a 3-day trip. Same meadow, same tent, same prints, and the same knocks. You already know the structure. What you don't know is the texture. When Bart says quiet, he means low decibel. When I say quiet, I mean missing life. The forest wasn't empty. It was being held still, like every living thing understood an instruction that we didn't hear. I kept waiting for insects or birds or frogs, and none showed up. Night didn't bring owls. Dawn didn't bring songbirds. That's not quiet. That's compliance. When Bart found the pine cone in the tent, he didn't mention the smell. Well, I did. The air inside the tent smelled like wet fur and crushed leaves and something like a sweet sour like fermenting apples. Not bear and not dog and something wilder and older. And that coarse black hair caught in the pine cone, it was longer than my finger. I touched it. I felt static off it. Not literal sparks, just a sensation that my fingertip had been near something alive moments before. Like the hair remembered the heat. Sal, I'm a lawyer. And one thing I know is men tend to treat being watched as a predator-prey dynamic. Women know there are other kinds. The forest wasn't hunting us. It was waiting for us to react. Every time we stopped moving, I had the sense of hundreds of tiny eyes in the underbrush holding position. When the stone click started that second night, Bart heard rock on rock. I heard intention. The clicks weren't random distances. They were ranges, near, far, left, right, like they were mapping us, bracketing us. But here's what Bart didn't hear. In between the clicks, there was a faint harmonizing tone under the air. Not electronic, it was natural, like a wine glass being circled by a damp finger a mile away. You don't hear it in your ear, you feel it behind the nose. When the footsteps approached the tent, the air inside changed pressure. Not from fear, but like before fear. Fear came after, and this was environmental. The kind of pressure you get before a thunderstorm, but more localized. The tent fabric actually bowed inward before the head pressed into it, like the atmosphere arrived before the body. Bart described the head shape. I will describe the sensation. When it leaned in, I didn't just hear breathing. I felt thought, and not words and not telepathy or some weird thing like that, just awareness. A sensation like someone had pressed a warm thumb gently against the surface of my mind to test how deep it went. And in that moment, I knew two things with absolute clarity. It wasn't hungry, and it was curious. This was not an animal inspecting prey. This was an intelligence examining a strange object, us, with the focus of a scientist or a child or something in between. Bart wrote about the sound. What I heard was worse. There was another tone underneath it, lower than sound travels, a subharmonic you feel in your ribs and don't really hear in the ear. It made my stomach clench, made the air vibrate. It wasn't trying to speak English. It was trying to bridge, like someone reaching into a bag for the right tool and pulling out the wrong shape. If it ever finds the right shape, we're done pretending these things are a myth. Everyone in the Bigfoot world talks about wood knocks. It's a cute idea. I wish that's what it was. These knocks had direction, cadence, and communication, but also intelligence hierarchy. 3 knocks, the closest one, 2 knocks further, 1 faint knock from the ridge. If you've ever worked in healthcare or military, you recognize hierarchy in sound. The nearest one wasn't asking permission, it was reporting. Here's the part I didn't tell Bart until months later. After the knocks faded and the footsteps withdrew, I fell asleep for maybe 10 minutes. In those 10 minutes, I dreamed I was standing in the meadow in bare feet under a full moon, and something was standing behind me, tall enough to block the stars above my head. It didn't speak. It didn't threaten. It just breathed, slow and deep. And in the dream, when I turned around to see it, I woke up instead. I woke silent, breathing in sync with something not in that tent. Bart talked about the twisted pine. What he didn't mention is that some of the other trees had turned their needles. Needles don't turn overnight, but several pines near the edge of the meadow had their needles angled in the same direction, like they'd leaned toward something and then frozen that way. Plants don't do that for bears. I don't think we encountered a relic hominid. I don't think we encountered a cryptid. Those are biological labels for biological brains. Whatever we met was older than taxonomy. Something that survived by not being seen, and when it's seen, by not being believed. Maybe these things existed before language and never needed it. Maybe they communicated in harmonics and pressure and dream bleed. Maybe they remember us the way we remember thunder, distant, powerful, and untouchable. If you ask me what category to put this encounter in, I won't say Bigfoot. I won't say cryptid. I won't even say paranormal. I will say this. There are apex animals. There are apex predators. And there are apex presences. We met the third kind. Terry. So there you have it. Remember earlier in the podcast, I had mentioned how the forest will completely twist your mind. That the human mind is no longer in tune with being in the forest 24/7, and weird things happen in your mind. Well, Bart and Terry are a perfect example of that. Whatever they encountered, whatever happened to them that night, Bart's account of it was perfectly credible. What he thought he saw and what he thought he heard was very real in his mind. What Terry saw and what Terry felt and heard was very real in her mind, but they were both very different. You've listened to me tonight, to stories that cannot be proven, to experiences that strain belief, to rules older than maps and laws and compasses. What Daniel shared tonight, what he lived, it isn't about a creature, it's about awareness. In the first segment tonight, we explored conspiracy, hunters, loggers, and researchers, sometimes credible, sometimes shadowed by government interest, all pointing to encounters that refuse to be ignored. A hidden intelligence, presence in forests for generations, quietly checked those who came too close. The second segment was about coincidence, how perception, isolation, darkness, stress, and stories themselves can build an illusion that feels real. Perhaps some sightings were just shadows, just fear, just coincidence. But tonight, coincidence seems too small a word for what we have heard. Segment 3 was the cover-up angle, with disappearances, missing evidence, federal investigations, and corporate interest might make discovery impossible. Why the truth could collapse our sense of control over wilderness. And segment 4, the paranormal, Sam and Johnny's two-night encounter, and how Daniel's words, the rules of fire, the land bending, the shadows that lag, the attention that notices before you notice. This is what happens when boundaries are crossed, when words are spoken carelessly, when curiosity becomes instance, when silence is ignored. The message is simple, though the warning is layered. Some things are older than us, older than settlements, older than maps, older than the cameras and podcasts that now track them. And they are still here, still aware, still listening. If you plan to go into the woods, into the mountains, into places where the world thins, remember this. The forest is not empty. The quiet is not peace. And what you think is absence may be just a different form of presence. We close tonight not with answers, but with more questions. Questions for the land, for the shadows, and for the spaces between. Because some things don't want to be seen, they want to be remembered. And for those who wonder if this is real, you ask yourself one thing. Have you ever felt watched without eyes? If you have, you already know where the boundaries lies. You have been listening to The Dark Zone. Here in the Matrix of the Mind, I have been your host, Sal Rock. This has been Conspiracy, Coincidence, or Cover-Up, Episode 3, Bigfoot. I thank you for tuning in. And until the next time, good night, America.